Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the City of Homestead Special Call City Council meeting. Today is April 4th, 2023, and it is now 5:30 p.m. For what is in effect the continuation of our previous council meeting to finish up some business. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Fairclough Staggers. Councilman Roth.
Here.
Councilman Fletcher.
Here.
Councilwoman Bailey. Councilwoman Avila. Vice Mayor Guzman.
Here.
Mayor Lawson.
Here. Again, thank you all, and thank you to staff for arranging calendars so that we could finish up. I'm pretty confident that this will be more productive and collegial than perhaps it would have been at 11:30 and later last week. Councilwoman Avila, you're first on the agenda. Anything that's still relevant and timely from your business last week?
Would this include closing remarks, or can I?
Yes, this.
So I'll open with some closing. Okay. I just wanted to thank our city staff and our Parks and Recs department for the great effort and your assistance with the Good Friday prayer breakfast that's coming up in conjunction with the Kiwanis Club of Homestead South Dade and the Women's Club, the GFWC Women's Club, who will be cooking a delicious waffle and eggs breakfast, is what I hear. Oh, you don't know about waffles? Oh. You'll have to come to find out. We have our guest speaker, which is former South Dade High School principal Javi Perez, who will be sharing his story. And we have a great agenda to celebrate the blessing that is Good Friday. I wish everyone else also a blessed Passover tomorrow and a wonderful Easter weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Councilwoman Avila, how do we sponsor the prayer breakfast?
And I also want to thank Mayor and Council for their sponsorships for the prayer breakfast. They were small donations, but we were able to gather enough money to cover 100 meals for military, and all the pastors and clergy that will be attending are also going to be enjoying the event for free as well. So it is open to the community. If you want to eat breakfast, you do have to pay a donation for the breakfast, but there's no fee to access and to hear the message. So, but thank you for reminding me about the sponsorships.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Fletcher?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a couple of items that I was going to speak about last week, but they have since been taken care of rather handily by the city staff. So I do want to talk about one thing that is probably not going to be very thought well of in the community, but I want to look again at our red light camera program. As many of you may know, I was in a car accident here a couple of weeks ago, and there were no cameras on the intersection, so it wouldn't have helped that particular event, but there are cameras throughout the city that are not working. We have not used them in quite some time, and for safety and accountability reasons, I believe we need to look at putting those back up. They're very helpful in accident prevention. People know they're there. They're going to maybe come to a stop. They're very good for accident reconstruction as well, and they could have helped solve many accidents that we have had in the community on our major intersections. So if we could take a look at that again and see what those numbers look like. I'm not a big fan of, just issuing citations. Maybe it's a random, the first 2 tickets are warnings or something of that nature, and then you get a ticket on the third one. Something we got to look at holistically with the program, but if we could take a look at that and see what those numbers look like.
Councilman, absolutely. We'll find out how it's currently structured, and we'll put an item for discussion if you like. We'll bring it back to the next council meeting.
Thank you. And then lastly, I was watching the Board of County Commissioners meeting today and noticed that they do have 13 people assigned to an illegal dumping task force in the county. 2 sergeants and 11 officers for the entire Miami-Dade County. So that's not quite the right amount, I would think, for that, but could we look at possibly working with them and creating a joint task force where they might be able to assist us as well in this area.
We'll definitely reach out and see what we can do.
And I too want to wish everybody a happy Passover and happy Easter, and that's all I have for tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Question to Councilman Fletcher. Do we know why the city stopped with the red light camera? Or does staff know why?
We definitely had red light cameras for years here. I think there was a turning point when a lot of residents would be calling council members complaining of having received tickets. And I want to say it was after 5 or 8 years, maybe the council decided they didn't want red light cameras anymore.
Okay, thank you.
To clarify, Mr. Manager, I think that it was time to renew the contract. And as a result of the complaints, the program was not renewed. Is that a fair assessment?
You're correct. They did not cancel it. They did not renew it. And then they went away at that point.
Was that a five-year contract?
I want to say, Colonel, I think it was more than 5 years. I want to say it was running like 8 years or something like that. We could get the more detail for you. I don't want to tell you the wrong number,
Okay.
but we had it for quite some time. No? Okay. We'll get you the specifics, but the mayor is correct. The agreement had come up for renewal, and council decided not to renew it. And I think we were at Dickinson Center council meetings at that point.
And
So
more
it's a while
accurately, I
ago.
think it failed in a tie vote. The motion to renew failed in a tie vote, as I recall. I may not be exactly on point, but I think that's what happened. But it's also my understanding that in the interim, there are new technologies, there are new statutory limitations, as well as new technologies that can help us detect crimes and criminals coming into our community as well, with the
We'll
license
definitely
reader programming.
Understood. We'll look at everything.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. All right. Councilman Fairclough Staggers, are you prepared to go forward?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilman Avila, for sharing the information regarding the Good Friday prayer breakfast. I look forward to that every year. To me, this week is Passion Week, leading up to Resurrection Sunday, so I'm looking forward to the prayer breakfast. I wouldn't miss it, and all of the services on Friday night for Good Friday, so totally looking forward to that. Also, I'd like to thank our Parks and Recreation Department for the Easter egg hunt at Harris Field. I love how organized it was this year by age group and category, and the events that you had surrounding the evening. My daughter and I really enjoyed our experience. I think she enjoyed the ice cream the most, her ice cream the most, but it was a great experience. So thank you so much for hosting that. Of course, you know, I provided some recommendations. I'm sure you expected that from me because I'm always trying to take our staff to the next level. But nonetheless, job well done. And speaking of parks, you'll see under my agenda item is the interactive water feature. So I am excited that we have a diverse portfolio of art projects in our pack, and I wanted to kick off one of our art installations in the park this summer. That's why I decided on an interactive water feature, because for many of us growing up, we didn't have splash pads and HOAs with clubhouses. I believe in Oasis, we have a splash pad. In Chateau, we have a splash pad. In Oasis, we have a splash pad. I'm not sure any other communities that have with the water buckets and all of that. But for us growing up in the Southwest, our splash pad was a fire hydrant. Like, we go out on the fire hydrant. But in this day and age, we don't have to do that. So what this is, it is like a mist, zero depth of water, but it's an opportunity to further expand the vision of our Larsener Park, to engage, to interact, and to create Homestead as a destination. So for the past couple of months, I've been visiting other municipalities with these art features. And Moon Over Gables, I think it was 15 days, 100K, and they had thousands of people there in their city. And the energy, the synergy was just palpable as you were there to experience. I mentioned Los Trompos, I mentioned Umbrella Sky that was in Coral Gables, and now City Place Doral, they're bringing Umbrella Sky back. And if you see all the promotions they have regarding that, just building the excitement, not just in Doral, but around Miami-Dade County. And if we're truly going to make Homestead a destination, these are some of the type of events that I think we should be hosting. But beyond the interactive water feature, I love the approach of curating events around the art installation. Like some that came to mind with me, to me, was Sundays on Sunday. So on one Sunday, we can have Sundays, kids can come and make Sundays on the park, and we can have someone to sponsor that. We can have a picnic in the park, where we can have a lemonade stand out there giving out fresh squeezed lemonade to families in the park. If we want to get a bit cultural, we can do paletas in el parque, popsicles in the park, and La Michoacana can be one of the sponsors. We can have something in the evenings to bring out families. And I feel this would be a step in the right direction to bring not only our community out, but Miami-Dade County out. This is hot right now in municipalities, and I think it's something that we should move forward with. This would be a pilot. We'll see how it goes, and then moving forward, we can have something for Hispanic Heritage Month, like the Los Trompos for Hispanic Heritage, and we can just dream big for other installations, but this would be a first start, a first step in order to activate this art phenomenon in our city, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Who would like to kick off the conversation? Councilwoman Avila?
Thank you. I'm 100% in favor. I love the idea. I love art all around. I think there is space for permanent art, but we have to keep the art evolving, and novelty is refreshing. So having these changing concepts and changing art pieces is going to give visitors a reason to keep coming back for more. I love the Sundays on Sunday and the paletas in the park. That's fantastic. When I take my kids, that's always the next question. Mom, are we going to La Michoacana for some ice cream? So if it's already in the park, Mom is going to be even happier. I love the water feature idea. I was very sad to see it kind of leave our original plans when we were doing the final development of the park. So to consider it coming back, it's like, of course. I mean, how can we fund this, and how quickly can we get it done? Or is going to be my next question. And that's going to be a permanent feature, right? The water feature?
No,
That's going to be,
This one wouldn't be a permanent feature. Normally, the features are for 30 days or 60 days. This feature is being proposed for 60 days because it's the summer, and we can keep it, fresh during the summer. And it's a water feature, and it's hot.
that's incredible.
Cool off in Losner Park with this water feature. And then the price point for this potential RFP would be $100K. And that was based on, like, some of the installations that I visited. They were there for 30 days, and it was about $50 to $55K. But with Moon Over Gables, that was 3 weeks, $100K. So when I look at the return on the investment and how much is being spent and the price point for this, $100K for 60 days is a deal.
It's also going to allow us to activate the other areas of the park. So whenever I go, everyone is crammed under the shades. Thank God we put them in there. And everyone's enjoying the really only interactive place of our park, other than the virtual interactive component, is the playground. But there's not, the rest of the park can be enjoyed in ways like this. So I'm very much in favor. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. Definitely on board. But I do think that this one could be a more permanent one. I don't understand what the difference would be. A lot of these examples look like sculptures in themselves. And if it's not a permanent one at Losner Park, at least could we maybe look into moving it around parks? If it's a small fee to move it around parks, and have it be a more static piece at another part that might be lacking.
And Councilwoman, that's an excellent point. The original idea was to be able to activate different parks. Obviously, if you're doing a more permanent structure, obviously the cost goes up. It would be more kind of like a pop-up art exhibit that we're doing Losner Park this month, and once we get the sports complex going, we could do one over there, or Roby George, smaller type things. So that was the mindset at this point, putting this together.
I love it, but if there is an opportunity and we spend a little extra and make it something that we could move around, I think that would be fantastic. And if it can be done by May 27th for our Art Walk, that would be stupendous.
Now you're pushing it.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I love the idea. I'm in full support 100%. I think the ideas are amazing, and I'd like to see them happen sooner than later. I'm all in.
Okay, so let me play dad, unless Councilman Roth wants to jump in first. Okay. I like the concept, and I think a water play space for many of our residents in the summertime is very appropriate and needed. And I went at a meeting or two ago when you talked about the umbrella sky and these other things. To me, that says art to a far wider group. I'm not sure that a water play park, in my mind, is really art as contemplated by this fund. So I would have two questions then. Would this more appropriately be a project that would be funded out of the Parks Department rather than spending art in public places money on something that's very temporary and not as permanent? And maybe Mr. Hennis can jump in here. Does the park master plan as written even contemplate expenditures on revolving or temporary art features?
To my knowledge, the master plan does not incorporate like pop-up type art. Remember,
His question is about the art master plan, not the park master plan.
no, the art master plan kind of put temporary art to the side, right? But I know at the last meeting when we were going over the master plan, the councilwoman brought the item back. And the concept is not creating a water park per se, but a piece of art that has a water component, being that, hey, it's the summertime, it's June, July, it's August, it's hot, and you're there to see, and I'll use Los Trompos because everybody can, but imagine if that piece of art was sitting there, strategically located parts of the park, and as you come by and activate it, it starts shooting water here and shooting water there, and it will be drawing the kids to that work of art as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something like Los Trompos, but that's the concept that was thought of. And so it would not be permanent, and like the councilwoman said, between $50,000 and $100,000, depending on what the structure is. And yes, Councilman, we could probably move it to another location. We just need to check with the artist.
Okay, so if it's not specifically in the art master plan, do we need to amend the master plan to expend monies for that item?
Yes. We'll
Okay,
need to add it to the
good.
master plan.
Well, thank you for that answer. I don't mean good, there's a delay. And secondly, thoughts on this being more appropriately funded out of sponsorships and parks and recreation. Hey, this council and prior councils caught a lot of flack for the expenditure of a lot of art money in the Ciberium that, there's still a feeling that it's not necessarily art. And I guess art is, depends on who's looking at it. I get that. But I don't have a good, warm and fuzzy about the utilization of art money for this project. I don't oppose the project. It's a question of which pocket we're taking that out of.
So I think whether or not you'd like to spend park money or art money on this is really up to you all and what you want your public art trust fund to be used for. I will say that the disadvantage to using our park funds is that we do not have this budgeted for this fiscal year, so we wouldn't be able to carry this forward at this time using the parks budget unless, I don't know, we shut down a facility or something.
But conversely, we're talking about spending roughly 10% of a finite pool of money for a 60-day display. Just putting that out there.
That's up to council, that decision. And like the councilwoman was pointing out, she's gone to similar exhibits in the Gables and now in Doral that they're having it as well. So that seems to be kind of the flavor of the day and these temporary art exhibits coming up. But in the end, it's council's decision how you all want to move forward.
Can I just
And
weigh in?
let me ask the Councilwoman, do you have specific information that these were art-funded or park-funded or some other?
Yeah, so I'll answer your question just to weigh in. What this is not is just water misting out of nowhere. If you look at the examples, these are art features. They're artistic with a water feature. And at our last meeting where we discussed our park plan, we discussed this and we added it to the park plan. So this isn't a new conversation. We discussed this, it was added, I believe it was unanimous that we added it to the park plan. So it's not misting water, it's a feature. And I've actually visited another interactive water feature in Palm Beach. And the amount of families, it's at the square, the amount of families that were there at that water feature with children, it was just amazing to see. But when we think about art, you know, some art is more appealing than others. Like for me, respectfully, the bronze sculpture is it's not my favorite. I don't see thousands of people coming to our city to take selfies or bringing their families to the sculpture. But making Homestead a destination, this is what's going to do that. So I appreciate the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, we have a diverse portfolio of art that will appeal to a broad base of people. That sculpture's not going to bring me and my family to Losner Park or wherever it is. This will. And to answer your question, when I asked them, okay, who paid for this? Municipalities paid for it, as well as some of the foundations in the community. They had sponsors to sponsor the different events at night. So it's a broad range of people to be able to pay for it. So it can't pay out of the parks budget because we just don't have the money for that. In our art and public spaces budget, we have it. So I just think it's a value add to our city, and it's truly going to bring people to our community beyond some of the sculptures.
No. Councilman Roth.
Yeah, thank you. Just a thought to add on to that, because I'm always about trying to figure out how to monetize events and things like that. It's a 60-day project. Obviously, there's going to be opportunities for vendors to come. There's going to be opportunities for food vendors to come out. And that's something that could help offset some of the cost. And maybe somebody needs to figure out what that's going to be, you know, per space, per day. It may not be so heavily during the week, but your Friday night, your Saturday night especially, are going to be more attractive to those things. And during the summer, so who knows what those opportunities are. So it's another way of thinking about sponsorships, whether it be through the vendorships, food vendors, the food trucks, and those guys too, to kind of offset those costs. I like the idea of the water for, especially July and August, if those are the 60-day period that we're going to do that in. And it's just the perfect thing for the area. And we have do we have a functioning water park now at the park over by Mast Academy?
The James Archer Smith splash pad is not currently functional. However, there is the renovation project, which is ongoing. We have already received the equipment. Pedro, do we have an estimated start date for the construction? It's permitted, but pending advertisement for the bid. So hopefully, we'll see it underway in the next couple months.
And so, are we repairing the equipment that was there, or are we just totally reconstructing what was there?
No, we are fully redoing it. It will no longer be a recirculating system, which was the challenge there, where it would keep breaking. So now it's going to be more like the toys, the buckets that dump, and less of the recirculating that it was before.
Because I like the thought of the permanent water features at some of the parks too, not at all of them, because obviously there'll be maintenance issues and it could be health issues and whatever. But just some things to think about when it comes to the water features, because that was what was exciting to me about Losner Park, was going to be the water feature, and then it turned into a fire and water feature, which we don't have either or at this point. So, and the iconic type attractions that we talk about, this would be a good test for the summer to see how many people will actually come and use and enjoy those attractions. Whether it fits into an entire art mode, I'm not entirely sure. I'll leave that up to Woman Fairclough Staggers, to her judgment, to bring those things to us as well. But I do like the concept of it, and to have it move around is good, and to be able to change it for seasonal is going to be good too. I can see snow in there December and January, right? You can see those kinds of things happening there, which some may say it's art, some may it's not art. You know, the key I think we're arguing right now is how do we pay for it, right? Who's going to pay for it? What fund's it coming out of? And I don't agree that we tax the Parks Department for that, because we have needs in the Parks Department as it is now. So we can debate whether it's an art and should come out of the Public Art Committee's funds, you know, or do we incorporate that with some permanent art as well, you know, in the structure. So just some thoughts I'm having, that's all. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Councilman Roth. Vice Mayor Guzman. All right, I'm sorry, so Fletcher?
Okay, yeah, I wholly, holistically support this idea. I just believe we need to come to an agreement on where the funding's going to come from. I think it might be something we could look at, you know, co-sponsoring with like the Eats and Beats type thing we've been doing in other areas of the city. You know, asking some of our local, you know, not-for-profits to help fund this, maybe some of the folks that are doing business in our city as well, to help us out. But ultimately, my question would start out, if we used the public arts funds and we were able to get money out of sponsorships, are we able to reimburse that back to that fund?
I don't see why not. I don't see why not.
Because I think we might have to do a little expense first and we'll get the return later, is the thought process. But,
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to
No, no, no.
interrupt, Councilman. Yeah, to keep in mind, to do the call of artists, we have to have the monies allocated already, and to go ahead and do that. But you have an excellent point, Councilman. Yes, if we can get people to donate to this particular project, and Matt kind of nodded his head, he doesn't see an issue reimbursing the fund. So we could recoup some of those monies.
I think this is just the beginning. You know, once you get one going and we see what the turnout's going to be and what all the hurrah is going to be overall, I believe people are going to be really engaged in this and come to the city of Homestead and help us out. So.
Yeah, and like Councilwoman Bailey said, if it's an art feature that we can literally pick it up and move it to another park on another day or the next year or something like that, is something that we'll definitely, you know, get a lot of use out of as well.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, when we do the call to artists, I have a feeling that we're going to be surprised with a lot of creative work, because Homestead is starving for more art. And when we put this to work, I think we've got to pay, let's say we're going to pay a premium at the beginning, but paying that premium is going to give us art that people have been asking for a long time. So when we do the call to artists, we're going to get, I'm assuming, I have a feeling we're going to get overwhelmed with a lot of great art that is going to throw us back. And I think Homestead is ready for that right now. I did also want to ask, things that we can do now to spruce up the downtown area, like putting string lights along Chrome Avenue from, let's say, 2nd Street to Maury. I think that'll add some life to that area, because I see it in other in other downtowns, but I've never seen that here in Homestead.
So we've already implemented the festive lighting, the string lighting along the light poles themselves in that area. We looked into doing string lights crossing Chrome Avenue, but the safety concern there is that even though we have the truck bypass, you still do have local truck traffic and, of course, those who are not obeying the truck bypass that may pass through and cause property damage, cause traffic accidents. So that's the safety concern there for us.
Okay, so getting to this timeline, I see all of this is to be determined after we get through the whole funding part. What is the amount of time that we would typically allow artists to come present their ideas?
And David, I'll kind of turn to you. What's the standard call to artists?
We usually allow about 30 days for them to respond to the call. Sometimes in the past, we've only received 2 or 3, and we extend it for another 2 weeks or another 30 days. Usually, the shorter the time frame, the less likely you are to get a number of proposals, because they have other things that they're dealing with, and usually 30 days is a good catch-all that you usually do get something back from them. So we can set it at any time frame that we like. We just haven't had a lot of good experience with response within something less than 30 days.
And Councilwoman Fairclough, would the artists be boxed into some of the concepts that you have here, or they can get creative with whatever they got? Okay. Okay, great. And the last thing I saw is driving down Maury, when I looked at the stage at Losner Park, it looked like almost like weeds going up, which I'd rather have the artificial bush that people put on walls, artificial ivy to be on both sides. I think that's a better look, and I think it's durable to withstand weather.
Which
You're saying
exact
it's like
area?
Some of the
regular weeds?
vine from the ground cover
Oh,
is
okay.
going up the outside wall
Oh.
of the stage.
And it makes it look abandoned.
We'll take a look at it. We'll definitely bring that up with Brightview.
And Vice Mayor, one more point, talking about what David said, the 30 days notice, then it's going to, the time it's going to take the artist to actually create the art. So we need to keep that in mind, depending on what proposals we receive, how long it's going to take them to actually create this stuff so we can actually put it in place.
Yeah,
So
I'm
just something
excited to
keep
see
in
what
mind.
I'm excited to see what that's going to bring, because I know there's a lot of people out there that have art that's destination art, where people come to gather with their families to take pictures, and that's what I think Homestead is lacking. So I'm excited about bringing this project forward. Thank you.
Well, and in that regard, though, I would perceive that someone who's going to answer this call to artists has something almost ready to go. Like the Umbrella Sky is a traveling exhibit. Chihuly is a traveling exhibit. Someone's not going to be recreating the wheel for this piece of art that incorporates water. So, I don't think our time concerns are not as relevant here as they would be with a permanent fixture. There are artists who have these ready to go.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes,
I
Councilwoman.
do also like the idea of, although the time period might be too short, notice for artists that would be inspired to bring something to the city in our parks. It could give them the opportunity to start getting ready and getting their ideas together for our future rotations in Losner Park or in other parks. So I definitely think that this is something we have to plan for and try to continue to beef up the art and public places budget. So how can we triple our budget there? What do we do?
More development.
Well, Mr.
That's
Manager.
where the funding comes,
but-
it's from the development.
but-
That's where I'm
I mean,
sorry.
the Art in Public Places ordinance was adopted a dozen years ago, almost. The cap has not been extended in that amount of time. And conversely, nor has the percentage contribution. So, if you're willing to make those amendments to exact more money from those who are responsible to pay into the art fund, that's how you obtain more money.
Well, thank you. So I would like to propose that we do increase the amount of the contributions that are going to our art budget, because we have a plan and we're being strategic and purposeful with these expenditures, and we're ready to start executing. So we're already increasing numbers in a variety of different areas of development anyway, so this is just part of that process.
So if there's agreement from council, we'll get together with Matt and James and David, and we'll put something together and bring it to the next council meeting.
Okay, also, while we're on the topic of some improvements on Chrome Avenue, while I was driving through the other day, I couldn't help but notice the signage. It's just deteriorated. A lot of them are faded. Some of the tow signs, maybe that's on private property, but if it is, the owners should
You mean
update them.
You mean like the county street signs, or?
No, like maybe the, parking from this time to this time sign, just the variety. We have a slew of different signage along Chrome Avenue, right in front of Seminole Theater, you see it. So maybe if we just do a drive along,
We
I'm
can
happy
do
to go
that.
with you, and
It definitely will be more than happy to set that up, and if it's our signage, obviously, we'll go ahead and take care of that.
thank you.
Hey, well, and then I guess we'll have staff go out and give us a sampling of what other communities do in terms of percentages and flat caps. And while we're at it, let's be sure, and I think we've had this conversation, that art doesn't take care of itself. It needs to be maintained and repaired every now and then. And I think that as we do that, we're gonna need to talk about a dedicated percentage of the fund every year to do that maintenance and repair on these art pieces going forward.
That's an excellent point, Mayor, and David could probably speak to it, but there is a certain percentage of each piece of art that is required to be maintained for maintenance of the art itself. So it's already in the code requiring that maintenance.
And as long as we're out here in the weeds already, 35 minutes in, don't ever bet on a short night. We had some discussion a month or two ago about establishing some sponsorship policies or guidelines, and I think that, and naming rights. And I think that's squarely in line with attached to the conversations we're having here. So I think it's important to get those ducks in a row sooner rather than later.
So with respect to the sponsorship, remember we spoke at two classifications of sponsorship: events, which actually Zach and I have been working on, and we have an agreement for sponsors, a standard agreement for any event sponsorships, what they're entitled to, how the funds will be used, and that's already been set aside, where that's taken care of. With respect to the naming rights, different cities have taken different approaches. Excuse me. If we want to go, again, if we want to go out, if we really deal with that on a case-by-case basis, I have examples from a number of cities and how they have handled things, the duration, in kind versus cash, different types of arrangements that have been made across South Florida. If there's a specific facility that we're ready to move forward with, then I can provide examples for, that type of structure for a naming rights agreement. We're currently redoing Miami-Dade County Arena. So intimately familiar with the process. You just have to point us in a direction if there's a facility that you want us to focus on.
Well, and I think, for the discussion tonight, I think the sponsorship covers it, but let's put on a workshop or committee of the whole agenda in the future, some of the options that other communities avail themselves of.
Sure.
To monetize city facilities for naming rights. So, yes.
Yes, I just wanted to just add, my vision for this would be to launch or kick off July 1, because that's really into the heat of the summer. July 1, and then close right before school starts, a big event in Lobster Park right before school start with the kids. I see a lot of summer camps coming over during the summer, bringing their campers to see the feature. They can write, they can draw the feature. There's so many things that we can do to engage the children and families around in this piece. So that's why we brought this now, to give us time to put out the call to artists, and then to be able to bring it on board by July 1 until before school starts. And then just finally, I'll close with I think it's very important for us to be innovative and creative and think about all stakeholders, different bases in our community. When I'm out in the community, all they talk about, there's nothing for us to do here on the weekends or in evenings for families. And every weekend I'm outside of the city in different municipalities because they have things going on. So this is what we need to be thinking about and bringing into our city. When I look at our portfolio and our art plan, it's something for everyone in that plan. And this is definitely something for families and children to engage, and you know that just pulls at my heartstrings, so I'm very passionate about that. And I thank you for your suggestion on trying to raise funds and get donations to be able to put money back into that pot of money, and I will commit to doing that to kind of bring down the costs. I will commit to reaching out to sponsors to help defray the cost for this feature if it is approved by this body. And I respectfully ask for your support to move this forward. Thank you.
Okay, one quick clarification. And I think I've heard two answers. I just want to be sure which way we have to go. Implicitly, do we have to amend the Parks Master Plan to include temporary art?
If I recall, like the councilwoman had mentioned at the last meeting, she did bring it up, and there seemed to be a consensus, if I recall, right? Right, but there was nothing specifically added, just that the temporary art. Now she actually has a call to artists, like a draft. That's what, the one we would go ahead and insert into that part of the master plan.
Okay.
Obviously, it needs to be tweaked with the timelines and things like that we need for this particular project.
So then we need a motion to expend up to $100,000 from the Public Art Fund for the acquisition for 60 days of an interactive art piece that includes water to be located in Lossner Park. Does that cover it?
Yeah, I just want to be clear,
Yes.
the $100,000 that you're authorizing, that's the value that we're placing in the call. Ultimately, that award is something that you all will make. So
All we need to do is
So
authorize a call artist.
you're telling us to set out the call to artists, and that step will be taken. You'll have final approval over the agreement with the artist. So that's, you're not approving the expenditure at the moment, but those are the parameters that would be included in the call.
And that's an excellent point from Matt. Depending if we get multiple proposals, we'd be bringing them all to you, so at that point, you all can select which one you prefer. Okay?
Wait, okay.
Sorry, one moment. Thank you, Ben. So, in an effort to not have this take longer, could we add that language in here that says that we would own that piece? It's not that at the end of the 60 days, they would take it with them. Okay, because that's what it sounded like. It's not that we only have it for 60 days.
No,
We can move it after that.
We own the pieces. They're ours.
I just
Okay,
wanted to make sure.
and that's a very good point, Councilwoman, because
No,
I
not
was kind
always.
of the impression we were renting a piece, basically.
We don't own it.
No,
It depends. Zach's telling me no, I'm saying yes. So it depends. If it's an existing, like the umbrellas, and they come and do that, obviously it's theirs. But it's something created specifically for us, we can make the argument that you're building this for us and we're keeping it, so.
I think we would need to be clear about that intent in the call to artists. My understanding is that for something like this, where it's already a traveling exhibit, we would not own it. But if it's the will of the body that you want something that we own, you can certainly
So if
specify
we're
that.
buying a portable exhibit, that's a whole different,
That's correct.
it might be difficult for the artists to do that for this summer, because now you're fabricating something specific for the city, and if your goal is July, that might not be feasible.
but we could do that in the future.
Yes.
So I guess we could stipulate if it's something that's already created and it's a traveling exhibit, David, right in the call, that, all right, it would be theirs, but if it's something's created specifically for the city, then we will maintain ownership at that point. It could be both, and depending on what the artist presents is what we decide, unless you think otherwise, Councilwoman.
I don't know if we can incorporate language for an either or, but from what I've experienced, they've only been traveling exhibits. We can think about something for the future, but I don't think we can get anything fabricated exclusively for us by July 1st. It won't happen. It won't happen. It won't happen. So my vision for this and in reading it is it's for one of those traveling art exhibits.
If I may, let me just add to the conversation. So I was not under the impression that we would get to keep the art.
Nor was I.
But now that you say it that way, if it's something that we can invest in and still keep it at the $100,000 mark, and that we can control it ourselves and bring it back every summer for that one-time investment, it does create a different scenario altogether. It makes me feel better about spending $100,000, right? So I'd be willing to explore that possibility too. I don't think we need to put a number on it tonight. Let's do the call and find out what comes back through either or, whether it's a traveling art, because they may not be able to create what we want in 90 days to erect it in July, but to think about it for the future, we invest money this year to see how it goes. It gives parks an opportunity to work with the programs to schedule and to program the activities throughout the summer, because it's not going to be just the water feature. It's going to be a lot of other attractions, as you said, and then they have the year-end one, right? So you have all the schools come out, or whomever, at the end of the year to do a big celebration, and school starts, whatever. But there's some good vibes here for that, because if we can bring it back every year and invest it one time, and we just have to maintain it, as the mayor mentioned earlier, we have to set up a maintenance account too. I think that's great, because then you can do the same thing in the wintertime and create the snow effect, right? So 8 o'clock every Saturday night, it's going to snow in Losner Park during the wintertime, right? Or at least during a 6-week period. Those are just great things, and it creates that want to come back every year too, right? Mommy, take me back to the park. You have snow tonight, It's going to create that. So, but we have to figure out a way to monetize all that too as well. So, vendors, food vendors, whatever it is we have to do. So, but great thoughts. This has been a good conversation.
So then, would the maker of the motion, when that comes, include the option in the call
I think
for
the motion.
traveling or acquisition?
Exactly. I think you're going to bring back everything that comes in and let the artist let us know what the options are for us to own it, or if it's going to be a temporary installation. So I think my motion stands.
Have a second?
A second.
Okay, I have a second by Councilwoman Fairclough Staggers. All right. Roll call. Is there any public comment? Susan Sorrentino.
Hey, everybody. Susan Sorrentino, 2610 Northeast 3rd Drive. I am thrilled to see all of you involved in art and public places and solving the problems right there, and it happens now. Thank you all very much. The one thing you haven't addressed is where's the water coming from? Who's going to pay for it? Just add that in your thought process. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, and have conceptually we even thought about a location within Losner Park?
Yes, there are several lawn areas with hose bib access. That's where we figured we'd be able to tie into. And of course, the city would pay for the water. It's our facility.
Because, just thinking out loud here, the lawn in front of the police department running to the north of the Veterans Monument might create the least amount of wet and mud in the rest of the park from that. Just a thought.
Okay.
All right. Any further public comment? All right. I just want to be clear. The only reason I'm going to support this is because it gives us the potential to own a piece of art. I'm not really on board with this kind of temporary rental type art, but at this point, since we have the option, the potential for owning it, I'll I'll go with it tonight. So roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Bailey? Councilman Roth?
Yes.
Councilman Fletcher?
Yes.
Councilwoman Fairclough Staggers?
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila? Vice Mayor Guzman?
Yes.
Mayor Losner?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Does that conclude your business, Councilwoman? Thank you. Councilman Roth?
Thank you. I wouldn't have been able to make these comments last week, but what a spectacular weekend we had, right? At Homestead Air Show, right? It was amazing. The weather was perfect. The event was great. It was a little bit hot out there, but we had a nice breeze that kept us cool if you were able to find some shade. You know, it was interesting when you're walking around there, you see where the shade is because everybody's sitting underneath the big airplanes in the shady spots. So it was really cool. But kudos to everybody who was involved in that, the Homestead Air Reserve Base for putting it on, and you know, all the volunteers and all the vendors and all the people and all the organizations that were out there. It was a spectacular event. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick updates. I had mentioned last month about potentially combining SWAC and the CRB and seeing how that could work. Well, we just had a meeting last week with SWAC, and I brought it up just to do a little brainstorming. And what they suggested is that they used to have subcommittees, particularly for the MLK breakfast. So I thought maybe that was our easiest and best route to go. Since we are looking to have a few extra members of SWAC so that we have those extra bodies in case somebody is absent, that we have quorum. So I just wanted to bring it up, and if you know anybody that was on the CRB that is interested in continuing to serve in some type of capacity, I would love to hear from them. The second update is, I had mentioned also that September we're starting a Firefighter of the Year program. So just a way to say thank you to our first responders. We are starting next month with some public service announcements, just a little information. May happens to be Swim Safety Month. So that ties in perfectly with the Fire Station 16 donating the life jackets for Roby George Park. So look out for those public service announcements, and then under there it'll have information on how you can talk about somebody that had a positive effect on you, any of our firefighters that you would like to nominate. And lastly, May 27th is Art Walk Homestead. It is our 6th year. And it is funny again because I wouldn't have been able to say this last week either. We have gone through each one of the different types of art forms, right? We wanted to leave that loose because I think art can be anything. So we have done dance, sports, music, fine arts, of course. And the very first year I wanted to focus on the mentoring programs because I feel like that is an art form in itself. And one of our first mentoring programs, BYOL, Build Your Own Legacy, they had just been to the Nationals last week. So I was going to mention that one of their teams won the state championship, again, 2 years in a row. So that is amazing. He had just started that 6th year. He attended Homestead Senior, and he didn't make the basketball team, for those that remember his backstory. He didn't make the basketball team, and he decided to start this mentoring program. And he was hired this week as the lead coach at Homestead Senior High School. So Art Walk does good things. So sponsorship letters are coming soon. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I think that brings us to Vice Mayor Guzman.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to start off with asking staff, have we finalized the impact fee reimbursement for the entertainment district for people that want to open businesses in the entertainment district?
In the downtown is part of the Miami-Dade County Enterprise Zone, so I believe they are already entitled to reimbursement of Miami-Dade County impact fees. We would need, I apologize if we already received direction for this, but if you all want to direct us to create a reimbursement program for city impact fees, we can certainly do so. Keeping in mind that the Miami-Dade County impact fees are the brunt of what a a new business, a new development would entail.
Yeah, I do think we should get aggressive with providing incentives for people to want to come to the downtown. We don't have any restaurants down there. We don't have a lot of life down there, so we have to get very creative with incentivizing and truly marketing that area to attract business. I feel that if we, during the pandemic, if Homestead Station had said free rent for a year, I have a feeling they would have packed up, they would have rented that location out because you incentivized them to come in there, and then they would have had an opportunity to scale those retailers up or restaurants. But we missed that window, and we have to think about doing something that creates a large incentive, enough for people to want to invest and give them that margin of safety so that we can have some activity in the downtown area. So if we could have that discussion with this council on, in addition to the Miami-Dade reimbursement, I'd also like to add, or to create a program for Homestead to also reimburse, so that we could truly go out and promote and have something to say that we are really trying to attract business down here in the downtown area. Does anybody have any objections to that or want to talk about doing that, and what would that look like in terms of funds?
Well, we definitely have to take a good look at it, because obviously there's public works impact fees, police department impact fees, parks impact fees. And so we'd have to see what impact that would have on those particular departments, especially for bringing additional, for example, I'm going to give you for example, we're bringing additional businesses to the downtown. I'm sure we're going to want an increased level of law enforcement as well, but in a way we're kind of taking away some of those impact fees from that as well, right? Which help funds, equipment, police cars, body armor, things like that for the police department. So it's something definitely we could do, and we could definitely take a look at. But I'd rather get you a better idea of what impact that would have for the departments, and we'll be more than happy to bring that back to council.
Let me ask you, Mr. Manager, in that regard, I recall that we established or enhanced the CRA fund to assist with new build-outs, facade improvements, construction type situations. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, but my understanding, the Vice Mayor, you're talking just downtown or the rest of the community?
I'm truly trying to work on downtown, because I'd
Okay.
like to have restaurants, I'd like to have more retail there. So if we could layer all of those incentives, one on top of another, I think that'd be a great start.
Yeah, and I know the CRA definitely is doing that right now, whether it's helping out with the build-out or helping out with the rent or improvements on the facilities as well. Definitely the CRA is doing that as well. So we'll take a look at the impact fees and see what impact that would have to those departments as well.
But we're not talking about waiving those fees, it's just a matter of which pocket they're coming out of. For example, if there were available monies in the CRA, we could create through the CRA a reimbursement fund for impact fees, so that they move basically from one account. Carlos moves those monies from one account to the other. We would never really waive those fees in light of our need of parks, public works, and public safety. There's a big distinction there, reimbursement versus waiver. And are you talking a reimbursement or a waiver?
If they get reimbursed, either or. I mean, I'm fine with either or, whatever the consensus of this body is, but I want to be able to say to businesses that are out there that we've got incentive programs that are going to help them reduce their capital investment so that they can get started. And in addition to that, I wanted to ask Development Services if there is a way to expedite whatever is in the downtown. Is there a way to, if we want downtown to thrive, is there a way to put these people in the front of the line, or have another person or another group of people that are expediting that process?
We can certainly look into that, Vice Mayor, and I'll talk to the building official and try to formulate a plan. The struggle is and we're gonna go back. When COVID hit, we used to take all plans manually. Because of COVID, that forced us into taking all plans electronically. And so the way that the intake happens is we get 15,000 submittals a year. They all go to permit submittals at cityofhomestead.com. I have 5 permit clerks. Each of them has a designated responsibility. And so they're processing as we receive electronically and then sending to the reviewers. We have MTCI and Cap Government as our building reviewers. And it is happening quicker because all the reviews happen simultaneously, whereas when it was in paper, it would get pushed around from reviewer to reviewer. So we can try to think of ways to expedite projects in downtown, but we'd kind of have to wedge it in the current process that we have that has already been manipulated as best as we can.
So let me ask you, in terms of the review process, let's say a mechanical reviewer is reviewing a set of plans. Does he have a certain amount of time to review those plans, and can another reviewer eventually review that same set of plans?
They all happen at the same time, which is the great part about doing it the way that we're doing it electronically. Because before, when it was by paper, we'd have a big set of plans, we had all these plan cards, and they would kind of get shuffled from desk to desk. Now, when the permit reviewer gets the intake, she sends a blast to all of the applicable reviewers for that specific project. So if mechanical, electrical, structural, building all have to look at the same set of plans, they can do so all at the same time. The only caveat is, in the permit record, only one reviewer can access the record at one time. So structural, building, and mechanical all can't access the actual Panamation record at the same time, but they can pull the plans from our shared drive, look at the review, start their comments, and then once the permit gets released by mechanical, boom, electrical can go in and enter their comments. Once electrical is done, boom, building can go in and enter the ADA comments, et cetera.
Okay, so an applicant that submits a set of plans is not going to get one set of comments from a mechanical reviewer at one point, and then somewhere down the line in the process, another mechanical reviewer then adds additional things that the previous mechanical reviewer didn't catch.
No, our goal is all of our inspectors have to cite the specific Florida Building Code or fire code that they're commenting on. So if it's Florida Building Code section 2.03 FG ABCDE, then if for whatever reason another building reviewer picks it up, which is atypical because we really only have one reviewer per trade generally. Building has, I think, 2.5, electrical has 1.5. We have one mechanical, one structural, 2 building. So every reviewer is going to cite a specific section. So if you go to round 2 revisions and you're addressing those first comments, you should not be looking for new things. The only scenario that would impact a new comment is if your revision created something that was inconsistent with code.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. The goal here is to get businesses open in the shortest amount of time possible.
And our biggest holdup is German fire, which we have no control over.
Okay. We can't get a Miami-Dade German fire person here and just say, hey, work for us?
No. No, that's subject to the county's jurisdiction.
Okay. So that's what I want to work on. So do you need consensus from, are you guys okay with creating these plans? Did you want to say something?
And thank you, Vice Mayor. I love when I hear conversations about economic development. I love it. Councilman Avila and I met to discuss economic development and what we can do to get businesses in our community, and particularly in our downtown. And I had requested a report from City Manager CRA of, okay, all the businesses right in downtown, what's available, what's open, who owns them, which ones are vacant, because that'll give us a clear indication of what can we actually bring and what do we have to offer. a prospective business coming into our city. So that report is available, if you can share it with mayor and council so that they can take a look at that. But we just approved the economic development firm to come into, our city and help us with that. And I think that is something that they can champion because we need to resuscitate that downtown. There was a business owner who requested a meeting with me and said, Patricia, these working professionals who I hire, they have nothing to do on a Friday night after work. What are you guys doing here? So thank you for bringing that conversation back to the forefront because we have to incentivize to bring businesses to our community. Before we help them get in there with the permits and all of that, we have to entice them to come here. What is the value add for them to come here? So that economic development entity is going to be critical in that, and that'll be something that you can definitely lead and champion, Vice Mayor, because it's critical. It's critical for the vitality of our downtown community.
And that's an excellent point, Councilwoman. We're meeting with them in the next week, and after we meet with them, they're going to be meeting with you individually. Okay?
May I add?
That's the Valle group? Is that the Valle?
No, that's Business Flair.
Councilman Roth.
Yeah, I want to get a little bit more specific to the helps that you're asking for. When it comes to the restaurants that we're all seeking in downtown, they have 2 or 3 real big hurdles to get over. One is the installation of grease traps, okay? So the other would be the fire suppression systems inside the buildings. If you were to figure out a way to incentivize and help and pay for those 2 large expenses and create a contract with the city that it remains, property of the city for X amount of years. You have to develop a contract with the landlord or whoever owns the building, or even in the building that we're purchasing. That building's going to have issues with installations of grease traps, fire ansel systems, and more importantly, as Michelle said, DERM and fire, right? So you can't put a restaurant in without it. And you're not going to get somebody to come into the city once they figure out how much it's going to cost them to do it themselves. You'll get many opportunities with chain restaurants because they understand the expense and they understand the investment. But if you want that mom and pop pub, if you want the, Irish atmosphere, if you want a place for executives to go after work to have a cocktail and some hors d'oeuvres, you got to give them the place to go. And without the grease trap and without the fire ansel systems, they're not going to do it. The expense is way too high. We had Sweet Jaylene's come to us, right? And I think one of the biggest issues they had, their hurdle was, one, working with the landlord and getting past the installation of the equipment. So if we can help them with that part of it, I think once you get the first one in the door, the rest will come, right? That's what they say. I think that's what we need to work on. Be specific about it. Retail is not the biggest, it's not the hardest thing to do. Retail is, you don't need these other types of things. You need maybe a change of use because it goes from doctor's office to a retail store. That's something they have to deal with, and they have to go through that process. But the restaurants are very specific, and we all like a good restaurant. But I'm telling you, the investment for them to do that in a downtown that has no life in it is going to be extremely hard to attract.
Thank you, Larry. Ms. Lopez, when did the Florida Building Code update? I know they update every 10 or 15 years or so.
No, I think it's every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah?
I'd have to, if you let me Google for 1 second what the last.
No,
I don't know
the
offhand.
point I'm trying to make is when I was opening the Quiznos restaurant there on US 1 across from Harris Field, we had to have a grease trap, but it was an above ground grease trap underneath the sink that was just tied to 2 PVC pipes. I haven't seen that or maybe it's not allowed in the new code, but I think that there might be ways to get creative with how to apply grease traps around the code.
Grease traps falls under DERM. The specifics of how to design grease traps, I would have to get back to you once I review the code with Linda. Because I know you need them, but I don't know how to design them.
Because if there's an ice cream shop that wants to open and they have, you know, a 1,200 square foot bay, and our code is requiring them to have a grease trap that, you know, it's equivalent to Chili's.
Florida Building Code.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, not Homestead, but the Florida Building Code, which is applicable statewide, is requiring the grease trap. And that's all monitored by DERM, DERM is Department of Environmental Resources Management. So countywide, they handle any environmental issues. Grease traps falls under that purview.
So if you could do the research and see when you're allowed to have an above ground grease trap underneath the sink, and that might be able to, we might be able to help some smaller restaurants get in a little bit quicker with smaller expense.
You may, but keep in mind, when you're talking about a full-blown restaurant, it's not going to be a simple under-the-sink grease trap that a Subway would have or a sub shop will have, because they're gonna gauge it based on food production is what they're gonna gauge your grease trap by. So if we want, you know, a sub shop in downtown, then we can get away with that. But what I'm picturing, Vice Mayor, is that we have to look and dream big now, right? You don't want a Subway down there. We got one down there now. You don't need more sub shops. You want atmosphere. You want what 4-8 was, right? 4-8 had a great atmosphere. They just didn't know how to run a restaurant, apparently. And now it's not going to be a restaurant because it's some kind of an office or something there. So that's the only reason I wanted to chime in, was the fact that if you get specific as to the wants in the area, whether it be from, you know, 4th Street to Maury or 4th Street to 4th Street, you know, you make that the zone of focus of where you want those businesses to go, and set up a program that says, listen, we'll do everything we can. We have monies available through CRA, through grants, through whatever. We can figure out a way to make it happen. We want you here, and we want to put you here. We want to help you, you know, open this business. It brings jobs. It brings a lot of things to the area. We just don't have that there. You have Casita Tejas. They're great, right? But people want variety. You know, they want variety. And I think if we set it up, and you're on the right track, I think, and we're brainstorming enough, we just got to hone in on the specifics of how much we can help them and bring them to the area, because it's going to pop eventually. Whoever makes that first investment is going to get paid off at the end. So we just got to keep going the way we're going and set it up so that we have the ability to say, look, you bring it, we'll help.
So staff is going to give us a very clear picture of what we can layer as incentives. So instead of telling people, hey, we've got monies that we can help you, let's just go ahead and formulate the plan and have it crystal clear, so anybody looking at that plan says, okay, this is how I'm going to save money coming over to Homestead at the beginning.
We could definitely do that, and including the impact fees, and I like the mayor's idea of using CRA monies for that. But then there's a philosophical question here. And Kamitra, I want to say we have about a 500,000, what was the amount we had that we allocated? 400? Business incentives, the dollar amount. A little over $400,000. Definitely.
How much of that's obligated at this point? Round numbers. I think we added for.
While Kamitra's looking that up, the philosophical question here is this. We have an idea of what we can pay for with these monies. Do we clearly explain it and put it on the city website, first come, first serve applies for it, and they get the money? Or do we focus on a particular restaurant or vendor that we want here and use that? And I'm going to give you a for instance. We have the distillery. I won't go into too much. You've all met the gentleman from the distillery. He's asking for a lot, okay? So do we do 50 here and 60 there, or this gentleman comes in and this is something we really want, and you know, we do a 100% effort to get him online, because we know that would be a major catalyst in changing the entire downtown. The other thing we have the Edison building, which is hopefully in next month we're going to be coming, and we're going to be acquiring that building. And Kamitra's already, and Zach and myself and Vivian talking to a gentleman up in Fort Lauderdale who's very interested in the site. And I can speak to you all privately about that after. So we have some, I would say, some big fish on the line here. They're nibbling on the bait. Do we want to give a little bit here and a little bit there? Or do we want to hold that money, you know, and for the big fish and get that project in line here? That'll be a big incentive, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to get somebody here if we really, really want them.
Now I have a question. What about ARPA money? Does any of that come into play when it comes to that area?
We can use ARPA monies for economic development. We have approximately $4 million, I want to say approximately $4 million left.
So that, let me stop
So
you.
that's a possibility, yes.
Okay, so now we're starting to find some dollars, right? So maybe we set up a region too, right? Maybe we go from Flagler to Chrome Avenue, from 4th to 4th, and say that's where we want to put this money, this is where we want to invest this money to bring in these businesses. I mean, I'm just throwing out some thoughts, right? So between that and what CRA has, there's a lot of potential to do a lot of stuff. And now it's getting exciting because it's real, right? That's all I got for now.
So
Thank you.
what,
And-
what I don't want to happen is what happened over at Homestead Station. They missed a window. We have to incentivize, we have to create a marketing promotional program to say we are incentivizing these businesses to come here, but we have to actively push that out, because if we're not actively pushing it out and waiting for stuff to fall in our lap, then it never happens.
We're not waiting for it to fall in our lap. We've actually gone to different locations. We've spoken to different proprietors already. And once again, offline, we'll be more than happy to tell you the proprietors we're talking to. So it's not like we're sitting down, you know, sitting on our hands here waiting for somebody to show. That's quite the opposite. We're actively going out there trying to bring in these restaurants in.
So, well, let me, and Councilman Roth, you got to the question before I did about the ability to allocate ARPA funding and how much we had unallocated remaining. You know, maybe this may be a conversation we should have had earlier before we hired this visioning group as well as economic development. I think clearly within those parameters, I think, you know, maybe even from Campbell to at least Maury, perhaps even as far south as Southwest 4th Street, you know, from as far west as the police station over to the east side of Flagler Street, we want to promote the dining, the entertainment, the nightlife. And to borrow from the Easter season, I don't know that we want to put all of our eggs in one basket with one business. We've got to have a sprinkling, but it's got to be a meaningful sprinkling. And for sake of argument, I don't have a problem allocating creating a plan where, and I know Ms. Faircloth thinks that we started with $500,000 this year in the CRA fund.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have $550,000 budgeted for business incentive fund.
Okay, and that's for build-out facade repairs for
That
both new and existing, correct?
The business incentive is as Jerry described. Those are businesses that we are trying to attract to come to the city. And the uses could be impact fee reimbursement. It could be build out or rent subsidy, permit fees. So those are some of the uses that we can use for those funds.
All right, so, conceptually, I don't have a problem if throwing $1 million out of ARPA out there to pump up that fund, to help catch those 2 or 3 big fish that once they're landed in our downtown boat, all the others will fill in because the big ones are here. And I'll leave it to you all who are in that business to figure out how that can be fairly done, and you create formulas and allocations for those monies in terms of percentage. As I said, you don't want to give one business $500,000 of the million, but if we're talking that we've got potentially $1,550,000 to help restaurants with fire suppression, I remember when they did the Women's Club 20 years ago. That kitchen was $200,000 in the late 1990s. I can only imagine what it is today for a real restaurant. So to get that, we're going to have to go there. But again, let me play the old dad one more time. Well, I won't say one more time. I'm not going to limit myself. A year ago, when we had the cleanup on a Saturday morning, I got all this talk about how we've got money in hand. We're going to do sidewalks, new curbing. We're going to reallocate the parking. We're going to have a better streetscape. And I'm sorry, I may sound like, the broken record. You can throw all the money you want at these people, but until we have a clean, safe, and attractive downtown, it's not going to happen. So where are we with all of this sidewalk and street signage? Councilwoman Avila brought up just, the informational and directional signage. We're supposed to have specialized street signs. We're going to have new street lights, this stuff seems to go on forever. The one who's making a career out of this stuff is not here tonight, but enough is enough. We got to have some forward motion on this.
So as far as the specialized street signs, you've already seen the directional and the map signs have been installed. The specialized street signs, we are working through permitting with Miami-Dade County. It is going to require an interlocal agreement that will be coming to you in the next couple months. The interlocal agreement requires us to attach our permitted drawings, so it's kind of a chicken and egg. You can't get your permit issued until you have approved drawings, and you can't get your ILA done until you have the drawings. So that will be coming to you. Unfortunately, that's just the process that we have to follow here, but once that is completed, work will move rapidly. As far as the streetscape project, the FTA money, you awarded the design a few months back. We're currently working with the contractor there, trying to refine the scope and trying to find efficiencies in the permitting. For instance, talking about using pre-approved products already approved by the Miami-Dade County Hurricane Approval Section to expedite the permitting of our bus shelters, the trolley stops. So we're trying to find those efficiencies for you to improve that initial 18-month timeline and bring it forward as quickly as possible.
And Mayor, I had mentioned this a couple of months ago. Remember, these are federal monies. These are FTA monies. So they make us jump through a million hoops to ensure that we're spending it appropriately, right? And so that's part of the challenge here. Just on the solicitation to go out for this particular, we had to bring special FTA consultants just to look at the solicitation to make sure that we don't get in trouble, because if we mess up on the solicitation point, doesn't matter what happens after. Later on, they could come back and say, hey, listen, you didn't do this properly and you're losing the money. So it's not that we're dragging our feet here, but the feds have special rules and regulations that we have to adhere to, and that kind of draws out the whole process. But with that being said, We already got the architects and engineers, they're actually working, like Zach said. We're trying to use already stuff that's designed and approved by the county, by the feds, and things like that to expedite this process. But once we get through this, you know we're gonna be going gangbusters to go ahead and upgrade the downtown.
Okay, I appreciate that, but when you and Mr. Good and Mr. Brea and I have walked the street, we've had conversations about removal of planters to create room for entertainment on the sidewalk and the way the intersections meet to create more open space on the sidewalk. Was that just talk to placate me? Are the architects off and running, doing their thing? We set the vision here. The 7 of us need that opportunity, not to have plans put down in front of us and say, take it or leave it, kind of like those park buildings that we all punted on.
Remember, there's the initial concept. I can come to the 7 of you individually, and you draw me on a piece of paper what you want, and most likely, I got 7 different versions. Remember, they're giving you the initial drawings, the initial concept. At that point, you all have something to look at.
Okay, so
and
when
then-
are we gonna have that? We don't know, okay. Fair enough.
I'll have to get
Next-
back to you.
Next year, I guess. But my point of opening that can of worms is I'm a believer that, you know, it's good to give folks money, but you gotta give them more than money to have a reason to come here. We've gotta clean up our act downtown in terms of appearance, period. Councilwoman Fairclough-Staggers.
Yes, I just wanted to add something. When you mentioned, do we want to just put a pot of money out there and just determine who wants to come? No, I don't think that should be the approach. I think we should be very intentional about who we want to come to our downtown. We're right there at Losner Park. I think it would be ideal for Home by Sweet Jelane's or Bougie Bays to open up a place where they can leave from the park, go get a muffin, a popsicle, or whatever, right there. I think we also need a distillery, something nightlife, and we also need something for brunch. That is a hot market right now. And before the Keys Gate Golf and Country Club closed, they had a brunch feature there on Sundays. I don't know if many of you attended. It was popping there. So those 3, minimally, we need to bring to our downtown. And there are many municipalities who've used ARPA funds to bring businesses to their community. It's hard work bringing them, but we don't shy away from hard work, right? We get it done because that's what we know we want. So I love the suggestion of the ARPA funds. We increased our CRA funds to be able to support these businesses. When we had our meetings, it was how much, 300, how much was it? I was shooting for $1 million, but we couldn't go there, so we just settled at $500,000. But
I think we started at 350.
we started at 350, and we increased it to $500,000. So we have to market it, push it out there. I have some samples that I've researched of municipalities who've marketed. This is what we want. This is how much we're offering. Come to us. I'll share that with you, and you can share it with council. But I like the approach of being intentional and going after who we want to define our downtown.
That was my intent, that we know. I think we're all in accord as to what we would like to see first. And I'll borrow a phrase from some restaurant folks who came down to visit me the other day. I was saying more upscale dining. They call it more polished dining. So that, the breakfast, the brunch, the diversity of everything, but, you know, within those categories, I think we're all in accord on, no, not at all. We're not just throwing money out there to see what sticks. This has got to be very targeted marketing and effort.
So Mayor, if there's a consensus from council, I'll be more than happy to bring an agenda item for the $1 million in ARPA funds, allocating it to economic development.
Everybody good with that?
And then, let me just
And
add
Councilman
one
Roth
more
wanted to
thought,
chime in.
please. I'm sorry. The other thing we have to consider up here also, and for you guys when you're planning, is available space in that corridor, right? Originally, the Losner Park plan had a restaurant space in it. I think if we build out that space, that would be one space we could automatically begin to market, right? It's controlled by the city, similar to the building, the Edison Furniture Building, right? You potentially have somebody slated for that already, right?
We're in talks with someone, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, that's exciting, right? Because that's, I mean, it's up at, they already have an operation somewhere else, so,
They have multiple operations somewhere else.
which is going to be one of those evening atmospheric type places where people can go after work and have a good time. I know we can't talk too much about it, but what I'm saying is, although some of us were hesitant on seeing the vision, but we're controlling our own destiny at that point, right? So we've got that. If we begin to plan the build out for the restaurant space that is adjacent to where Sweet Jaylene's was going to go, I guess. I'm not even sure what's going on with that anymore. It's been like 2 years, which I think is just strange that it takes that long. But we can begin to build out that space and offer it up to somebody, right? I mean, it's there.
I think we have enough bricks and mortar. There's a reason we cut that out of the plan. Something that looked like a Johnny Rockets plopped down in the park was a lot of money. Let's give the private market some breathing room. We own Town Hall. We've given you authorization to put that out there. We're gonna own the Stem Bridge building. Enough with city-owned bricks and mortar downtown.
But I just wanted to point out, it was valued engineered out because of the cost of the park. That's why eventually the fountain and the restaurant was not done. It does not mean we can't come back. We already have the drawings and design for these things, so we could definitely come back and do them if
The
that's something
infrastructure
council
is
wants to
there.
do.
There were change orders
Yes.
to put the infrastructure in for someday to do the water feature and the
Yes.
restaurant. But I'm not a supporter of the city doing bricks and mortar in the park or on the street. We've done enough. We're gonna put money out there to let the private market do their thing.
Which is good too. I mean, we don't have to do it ourselves. But again, I don't think that the grease trap was put in the ground during the process there too. So that's the same concept that I'm talking about, is that if we offer that space out to somebody to do their own build out, there again, you're at that expense, and it's a deterrent for somebody to come in and to build there. So that's where I got back to the beginning, where we have to be specific about exactly what it is we want there. And if we're going to put restaurants, we think restaurants is a priority, we have to set up some kind of a fund to help them with those expenses to get going. So, and the mayor already pointed out, 20 years ago, it cost $200,000 to put a very inadequate kitchen in at the Women's Club. So I can't imagine what it costs today to do.
I'd like to add something to the conversation, please. I want to thank the Vice Mayor for bringing it up for discussion, and, you know, it was kind of impromptu, but it's a reminder that these conversations are happening because we feel, there's a feeling of inactivity. You know, we know that you guys are doing a lot of work in the background, and there's a lot of conversations being had, but when it comes to, you know, visually seeing the mile markers being achieved and milestones being moved, there's a lot of stagnation going on our end and in the public's eye, and we have to also talk to the public about it. The challenges that I see is the same thing that Councilman Roth is saying. It's the infrastructure for these businesses to be able to come in and open up. So I agree that if we can be specific about, okay, we're going to give you a free grease trap if you open up in Homestead, it's an example, but it's something that it's eye-opening, it's different, it's, wow, let me inquire more. Maybe I don't need a grease trap, but maybe I could use, you know, something else for that spot or that location. I do believe that a restaurant is necessary in Losner Park. That was the way that I had approved the plans, and it was necessary also for the bathrooms. And I don't have a problem with reactivating that project if it's feasible, if we can do so. And I would like for us to have an ongoing discussion. I don't want it to just be brought up in conversation under one of our agenda items. Can we make it a staple in our, you know, city manager's updates or monthly or bi-monthly workshop, especially now that we've hired the firm? And the Sunshine meeting that we had with Councilman Fairclough, we talked about the person in that position and they have since been replaced, correct? So I don't recall, them coming to council and giving a presentation to us. Maybe it's time for that. I'd like a recap, I'd like a refresher. We should all be reminded as to the progress that's going on, even if it's kind of under the surface and unable to be seen, publicly, so.
Yeah, if you recall, that position was phased out with the idea of going out to the street and bringing in a company, and that's where the Business Flair company comes in. And it's just a friendly reminder, if you recall, I want to say 2 months ago, we started updating you all on the businesses that are actually looking into station coming in. We've kind of done that twice over the last 2 months. This week, we had a meeting with them, and so we'll be having another update for you all this Friday when we do the council updates. And at that point, I can give you a little bit more idea of the actual restaurants we've spoken to regarding the Edison building and actually the downtown. But once again, it's very cursory. We're talking to them. We're trying to get them down here. Some have actually come down already and looked at the downtown. But remember, this is stuff close to the vest. We don't want the word to get out. We want to be able to negotiate and talk to these people and actually get them down here. So we'll be more than happy to update you all.
Vice Mayor, back to your business.
Question, let's say we get a very, very good restaurant in Station. Where would the big food trucks, where would they deliver the food? Because there's no alley in Homestead Station. So would they have to pull in through the circle, when you're going to the movie theater? Or would they kind of park in front of Toro Taco?
The intended loading zone there is actually on the First Ave side. You would be able to park there. You would have to load off in the loading zone there and then make your deliveries through the back entrances.
Okay. Another question for Development Services. Regarding the Chrome Corridor, I know that the funds that are allocated for that project are from ARPA. And ARPA funds and our finance department are working to get those funds allocated so we can start the process. Is there a way, and maybe this is a Matt question, is there a way that we can get the process started and then reimburse ARPA funds?
We actually have a meeting tomorrow at 11 to talk about the allocation of the ARPA funds for the projects. As the manager, indicated earlier, that's federal funding and there's very specific guidelines. I asked, can we start the project and then just get reimbursed later? Meaning, whoever the consultants are, not me. And we were told by finance and procurement, which are the departments that know what they're doing with the ARPA funds, do not start work and spending dollars until we have dictated the exact procurement process in line with the federal guidelines. So they're working through that. And I've never dealt with ARPA funds, so it's not my wheelhouse, but that's what I was told.
Okay, so is this setting the precedent for any project that we bring forward? We're going to go through this process?
I think every project is independent, right, Malia? She's nodding yes. Every project is independent, and procurement would need to look at each project to determine scope and proper procedure to comply with the federal guidelines.
So the project that Councilman Roth brought up, saying let's allocate $1 million for, incentivizing businesses to come here. Once we identify the business that wants to come, and they're ready to receive funds, are they going to get surprised with, hey, by the way, we got to go through this process, which might take
I'm going to defer to the
months
city
to a
manager.
year?
The answer prior to anybody coming down here. Well, since, once again, is economic development, which is something that's definitely allowed through ARPA. We just have to double check how that has to be structured, and we will do that before anybody comes down here, so we don't slow anybody down.
Well, and that's a very good question, because I don't want these big businesses to be in the position of some of these small homeowners that were awarded a grant a year ago, that now we have procurement issues, now we have insurance issues, and we're all just chasing our tails over and over and over again. you know, when we set this policy to allocate this money, we don't want to hear 8, 10, 12 months later that it's hung up in bureaucracy, because we just don't want to hear it. Excuses are done. I know there are federal guidelines. But again, when I have people who got a CRA grant to do a little bit of work on their house a year ago are telling me that because we changed insurance requirements, a year later, they've not been funded. And then you tell me, oh, we have to hire Mr. Glass to make sure that all the construction, or that we've got to hire this construction company. So before we get too giddy, I guess we better make sure that we're not going to tell ABC Restaurant Group that you can't use your contractor that builds all of your other units, that because you're getting federal funds, you've got to use DEF contractor. Is that what we're going to be faced with?
We'd have to see.
That was all for my business, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's get an answer to that before we even fund the program. Why
Yes,
go
ma'am.
through the motion and find out that it's really not doable? Okay. Sure, Mr. Kraft. Let's get Mr. Kraft a microphone, please.
I think it's a great idea with this incentive and slush fund and what have you not. But will there be an oversight for the slush fund? Because it's cash money, and there have been some stories about homestead and cash money and slush funds in the past. So who will do the oversight?
What was in the past is in the past. We have finance people with education, integrity, and professionalism. So this inference that we're creating slush funds has no place in this room.
Thank you.
There are safeguards. There
Thank
will
you.
be safeguards. Thank you all, council. All right, my next item was a discussion on the implications or whether or not we want to take any action with respect to the potential ramifications of Senate Bill 102. And just kind of to set the foundation, last Wednesday morning in Naples, the governor signed a bill, the so-called Live Local bill. But if you thought the RTZ contained some preemption, you ain't seen nothing yet. There are some good things in the bill, but there are some items dealing with density and height that I guess the item before us tonight is my request to have council authorize the development services and the attorneys to go forward, sketch out the implications, determine the zones of influence, and talk to us about what tools are available to address this far-reaching bill. Mr. Attorney?
Sure, I'll put a little color to it, and then if the council's will get direction. So the bill is far expanding. It deals with financing of affordable housing. It's really meant to encourage the development of affordable housing. The area of focus for cities throughout the state now is a preemption of local zoning for affordable housing developments, and that takes place in a couple of ways. The bill provides that a city must authorize multifamily and mixed-use residential uses in any area zoned for commercial, industrial, or mixed use if at least 40% of the residential units proposed in a multifamily rental development are affordable for at least 30 years. It provides that a municipality may not restrict the density of such a development below the highest allowed density on any land in the city where residential development is allowed. It provides that a municipality may not restrict the height of a proposed development authorized under that section below the highest currently allowed height for commercial or residential development located in its jurisdiction. within a mile of the proposed development. And it provides that, and this is a big one we have to flush out a little bit, that a proposed development authorized under the section must be administratively approved with no further action of the governing body. So the bill is not as prescriptive as one would have hoped, and so certainly there is a little bit of ambiguity here. What we'll need to do is adopt some measure to implement its provisions, particularly when it comes to the administrative approval, because, while the planner has certain authority here, it doesn't contemplate anything of this scope. And then there are other issues, and I'll provide you guys, a menu after we work through this with Development Services, and James and I, and actually the rest of the attorneys at the firm had a meeting about this just today for an hour and a half, and how cities are going to go about addressing this and its impacts. We'll provide you with a menu of the options that you might want to consider to preserve the tax base, to make sure that these developments don't turn into developments that you'll see in maybe northern cities where there are different criteria for the affordable units versus the non-affordable units within the same project. Maybe you don't want to create two classifications of residents within these developments. So we'll provide you with a sort of a menu of options that you can use to address some of those concerns, and we will prepare an ordinance to that effect, implementing whatever your ultimate decisions are.
And Mr., if I might, Mr. Pearl,
Yes.
we're on sort of a tight time frame. Whatever we're going to do needs to be adopted by June 30th.
Yes, July 1st is the implementation of the ordinance, so, of the statute, is the effective date of the statute, so we're going to want something in place before then.
Council, questions? Mr. Vice Mayor?
With all of the provisions that you just mentioned in this bill,
Yes.
I think it'd be a wise move for us to pass that information on to the groups that we're working with for that visioning session, so that they can get an idea of what type of impact that can have. So when they start their process, they already have an idea of what densities can look like, and where they want to add certain amenities and other things. So we want to give that information to them as soon as possible. Because when does their contract start, by the way?
Already, I think we're going to start setting up meetings with you individually to go ahead and meet. So they want to talk to each of you individually, get an idea of what you're looking for, and then start having the charrettes.
That way, if there's something that we can't control because the state has preempted us from doing it, let's go ahead and get in front of it and try to make the best we can with the hand we've been dealt.
That was the purpose of this agenda item, to get ahead of it, make the best of it, and, figure out what workarounds may be available, and if we want to avail ourselves of those options.
Okay. So Development Service will give that stuff to those people.
Councilman Roth?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious. This is a statewide law. What are other municipalities around the state planning on doing when it comes to even trying to repeal this law?
My understanding is that the League of Cities didn't have a whole lot of success in early negotiations here. This happened. Like there was really no significant push against it. It was approved overwhelmingly, and while there may be a push, I'm sure that in the next term, you'll see some effort to clarify a few points, because there is, when you put something like this in place, litigation is going to arise, across the state over comp plan inconsistencies, things like that, and things like that will happen, and things will have to be addressed over time. But in the interim, I think we're going to have to do, the best we can with what the hand that we've all been dealt, and it's not just, it's every city. And so every city is now looking at their comp plans, you know, the property that's available for development within its boundaries, and yeah. And again, I mentioned, I'll provide you guys with a menu of options of things that we haven't been preempted from regulating, that you can avail yourselves of, and we can, you know, we'll go through that. And I don't know if the appropriate venue for that at some point in the future will be a council meeting discussion, or if it's going to be something broader that you want to set aside on its own. But I think we'll come back with a report, and if you, at that point, you guys deem that you want to set it aside, we can do that. Have a breakout meeting just to walk through those issues. It's a big deal. This is a massive preemption.
I get that.
And it impacts.
I get that. And, you know, those of us that sit on city councils and city commissions should be, you know, extremely concerned. And, you know, for the state to simply strip us of any zoning authority when it comes to affordable housing, I think is a very irresponsible move. And I don't know, I'm hoping the preemptions will do some stuff, but I'm fearful that we'll be challenged because of what the state has put in place. Now, I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't understand all of it. And I may not ever understand all of it. Maybe the mayor will, but I probably won't. But I'm relying on you guys at this point to at least have somebody in your staff that becomes a total expert at what we're facing, so that we know how we can best position ourselves. And I would support anything that we could do to send a message to Tallahassee that says this is not acceptable. I mean, it's similar to what the county was trying to do to us as well. And we are our own municipality. We are our own city. Sometimes we're silly, yes. Our own city. And we're that way for a reason, because we want to control our own destinies. And when the state comes in and says, we want you to do this instead, I just really think that that's not a good practice. So I'll leave it at that for now, but I'll support whatever we decide we want to do and how we're going to do this.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Avila.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was making a list of the things that you were saying, Matt. So number one was wherever we have commercial, industrial, or mixed use, we have to also allow the multifamily, correct? Just want to make sure.
Provided that they meet the affordability requirements.
Got it. And then,
That at least 40%
40%
of
of
the
the
units are deemed to be affordable, which
Okay.
is a specific definition in and of itself.
got it. And then the second one was that we cannot restrict the density to be less than what we already authorize and allow in our code.
The highest allowed density where residential development is allowed.
So it's not telling us that we have to increase our density, but
No.
that we cannot require them to do less than what we already allow.
They are, as a matter of right, they can come in and obtain the highest.
Right, because, I mean,
So if the site, I want to make sure I understand what you said. So if the site allows for, 5 units an acre, we cannot say, well, we won't approve it unless you do 2 units an acre. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
No.
That it's restricted?
no, they're going to be entitled to the highest density where residential development is permitted.
On commercial,
On commercial
industrial, or
and
mixed
industrial
use.
or mixed use land. It's not residential, because it's not, the preemption is focused on expanding where affordable housing can be constructed. And so if they meet these criteria, then they can be constructed and be entitled on a commercial piece of property or an industrial piece of property to the highest density that's permitted in our residential zoning districts.
Okay, got it. And that would also include the highest height
Correct.
allowance? Okay.
Yes.
And then it would have to, and it would allow for administrative approval, nothing for here. Okay, just making sure I understand the bullet points. And I'm in favor for sending a message that we control our own destiny. And density. Yes, I agree to that. And Absolutely. It also reminds me that we should also continue our conversations with regards to density in the downtown and adding residential into our downtown Chrome Avenue corridor. So it's just a reminder to me. I think it's been several months that we haven't even talked about that, or maybe it's on an agenda in the future, or maybe it's coming up with the vision board people,
We got the visioning people.
the visioning people. But, yes, I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, it really, and this was brought to my attention 2 days after it was filed. And I tried to work with the sponsor of the bill, even tried to work with the president of the Senate, and this was a cake that was baked from day one.
And how does the home rule thing not help us here?
They laugh at home rule.
At least for the public and to help me understand as well, why is that not a protection for us?
Well, where our charter provisions, our comp plan, things like that, they can't conflict with general law, and this is now general law. And so this supersedes, they have the right to preempt us.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Vice Mayor.
Just so that I'm clear, effective July 1st, a developer can find a commercial, industrial, residential lot,
No. Commercial, industrial, mixed use.
mixed use. And they can apply our highest density, which is 63 units an acre. Is it? No?
The highest density that we have currently in the books, because I was reading my code as I was standing here, is in the government district for properties that are deed restricted to senior housing. We did this for Homestead Gardens. 30 units per acre. That's the highest density that we have captured in the code, and it's a deed restriction.
I don't think
so
that's correct. We authorized 63 for Flagler Lofts,
Homestead Flats.
whatever it is.
Homestead Flats?
It wasn't that high.
Codified?
Mr. Pearl, care to weigh in on that?
It's not codified.
My thought process is based upon, at a very minimum, it's going to be the 63 that we approved on city-owned property right here at the intersection of Chrome and Flagler. With, well, Mr. Pearl.
I want to be clear. As I said at the outset, the bill is not as clear as you would like it to be. And so one of the areas that's open to interpretation, but what I think most cities will take the position is that existing nonconformities that are outside of the codified entitlement are not the rule. I know there's concern about, for example, a county-owned property that is the county preempted our zoning for, in the RTZ legislation. That is not our highest permitted zoning. That is a one-off. That is not something we permit. But it's, to your point, Mayor, it's one of the things that this is one of the areas that we need to work through and evaluate. And it is an ongoing discussion amongst all of the cities. It was one that was had today, and it will continue to happen over the coming weeks as we all work to insulate the cities from, and implement this in a way that's acceptable to the cities.
So interpreted most favorably to us, it would be 7 stories and 63 that we approved in a very nuanced and limited manner. That height
Mayor,
you did?
sorry, I believe the 63 for Flagler was approved on first reading, so it has not yet been codified. But to your point, on second reading, it would then become the highest.
Right, if it's adopted at second reading. Currently, it's not codified.
And that opens up a whole other discussion that we won't go down the road of why haven't we had second reading, but we won't go there tonight. Okay, so let's assume that. For me, that's a best case scenario, and to Mr. Pearl's point, despite the policy and philosophy, it's written in a manner that my fear is that if I were an affordable developer, I would come in and say within the four corners of this statute, it says the highest density and height allowed on any residential parcel in a municipality. So, worst case scenario, with the county-owned property within the confines of the RTZ, we're at 25 stories and 250 units. That is that's Armageddon. Not that 63 might not be Armageddon for any kind of mixed use downtown. It could be all, because there is no requirement of mixed use. It can be all residential. So, Vice Mayor?
Therefore, I'm assuming that there are developers out there that are chomping at the bit now to say, hey, 3 months go by, I'm ready to rock and roll in the city of Homestead.
That's what developers' attorneys are sharing with me.
Okay, so, go ahead, Councilwoman Avila.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and just maybe it'll help us get more clarity on this. So, obviously, their plans are going to have a slew of variances, aside from density and height and, location of commercial, industrial, or mixed use. I mean, don't all the other variances that are going to be triggered create those blockades that we still have to, variances on balconies, I don't know, things that
No,
are going
as
to be.
long as they draw something that fits the rest of our code, they're in.
It has to fit the rest of the code.
Which likely won't. So, but we would, maybe you can't answer because like you said, there really isn't a lot of clarity in the bill, but would we be able to have the safeguards in place for any of those other variances to block?
No. Among the things that I will bring back to you are the areas in which we are not preempted that you can consider. Unit sizes, setbacks, things of that nature. Those are things that we haven't been preempted from regulating. And so when I said I would bring you a menu of options for things that we can implement, that is what I was referring to. I do, look, because this is going to be a first impression, yes, there will be challenges. There's no question that developers won't be aggressive. I don't necessarily want to provide a roadmap during our conversations here. But I think that, and the mayor put this on the agenda, I think it's important that everyone's aware of it. Prior to the next council meeting, I'll have something in writing, like a memo that will explain in a little bit more detail for each of you to review. And then we'll be working on, in the interim, because we are on a time crunch, an ordinance to implement the administrative approval procedures and any other areas which you collectively would like to address. So, that is already being worked on. We're pushing forward.
My last question, the part that says these projects can be approved administratively.
Yes.
Is that staff approving?
No architectural oversight, nothing.
So even if we created a framework for staff to abide by, can that be implemented?
What do you mean?
Let's say, if it could be administratively approved, there are some safeguards that staff can implement to say the character of our city is X, Y, Z. And administratively, I disagree, or I'm not comfortable with your.
So currently we have general design guidelines that we follow. You could likely beef those up for specific projects if consistent with the Florida statute.
And I want to be clear that these projects are still going to go through a DRC process. They're still going to be reviewed for compliance with every other area, the setback requirements, units, code compliance. I mean, that process is being undertaken. And to Michelle's point, and I go back to, I'll be coming back to you with a menu of things that you can regulate to ensure that the projects meet what you would like, they result in what you would like to see to the extent that we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fletcher, care to weigh in?
I'm going to wait until Matt provides us with some more detail. I think it's very important that, I think we're going to need a workshop on this specifically, sooner rather than later. Again, there's a lot of detail in this bill. I think we're going to have some options that we're going to be able to employ. May it be in the administrative side, or we may have to increase fees or something of that nature in order to help offset some of those costs if we're able to do that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Yes, I agree with getting more information from Matt because this is loaded and a lot of this stuff was like Greek to me. So I'm waiting for that information
Good.
for you. But what I did want, I was curious to know who was the proposer? From where? Because
The
sometimes
Naples area, Collier County.
sometimes they propose this legislation and they're kind of out of touch with the rest of the state. So I was curious to know who was the sponsor of this item.
All the information I have is this was a personal initiative of Senate President Pasadena from Naples, from the area where they've been hit with hurricanes,
Yeah.
and folks are wanting to come in and do this type of development, and local codes don't allow that.
Yeah, but it's to our detriment. It's not fair.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I mean, she's trying to solve a problem, affordable housing problem, and that's one step towards solving an affordable housing problem. You're always going to have, not in my backyard.
Well, this is far more than not in my backyard.
Well, again, to the things that we can control, you know, we can put all of the parameters we want. But the things that we cannot control, then I guess I'm glad you brought this up so that we can get ahead of it.
No, and that's my goal, is to get ahead of it to the extent we are able to get ahead of this and help preserve some character in our community. So I'm going to assume we've got some consensus from council to have the attorneys go forward with this. Very good, thank you all. The next item, and we'll take items 3 and 4 together. So let me give you some background. A couple of months ago, we had before us staff's recommendation to increase the electrical infrastructure charges for new developments. And they talked about how many years it had been since that had been increased. So it kind of got my attention, and I asked the manager to bring finance and public works and electric utility together. I'm just really trying to get a handle on how this happened. And, you know, it doesn't really matter who dropped the ball and when. We moved quickly to address that issue. But in that meeting, kind of an aside comment was that we have nothing in place for water and wastewater contributions. That unless a project goes over capacity, there's no contributions in general. So it occurred to me that we needed to have the discussion about doing the study and enacting a water and wastewater fee so that as these new developments come on, when they come online, they are paying for capacity. And certainly the biggest issue is wastewater capacity. And to go into the next tab, we are in effect in a moratorium in certain areas due to the lack of capacity that our wastewater lift stations have. If you all are familiar with the Sunny Lee Plaza, only 4 of those units are rentable, they're rented. The other 8, as I recall from the owner, cannot be rented because of capacity issues. If you'll recall, we reviewed an ALF project just behind that without that pump station can go nowhere, nor can the new and improved 7-Eleven that's supposed to be next to the Sunny Lee Plaza. and that to do the necessary upgrades there are about $4.5 million that it would have to be done with somebody's money at some point to get that sector of the city back into the capacity. And remember, Durham makes those analysis. Again, we've heard tonight about how Durham and other county departments have jurisdiction here and we have no control. And this is one of them. And I think that as we go forward and we're entertaining more of these projects that have come before us lately and those that will come before us in the coming months, it seems to me we're going to have a real issue with the capacity across the board. You know, as development and redevelopment comes more and more to the west side of town and the final big development to the east side of town, I think it's important that we consider whether or not we want to take the steps to enact an impact fee with respect to water and wastewater so that there is that, you know, or provide the opportunity of the developer to do the system upgrades on their own so that we're not casting about when we're in crisis mode looking for $4.5 million or whatever it may be to do those pump upgrades. So, you know, I've been through in my first tenure here a study process of impact fees, and I asked Mr. Pearl to, you know, give us a primer on the public, a primer on how that works, what we have to do in order to justify and enact those fees going forward. And obviously, you know, in the past, a moratorium of sorts was attached to that. This was put on the agenda just as an attachment to the discussion of that. Because these studies can take months, if not over a year, and we may find ourselves with a study and the target amount, and everybody's come in and we're left with no dollars in hand without some level of a moratorium. So, Mr. Pearl?
Yes, Mayor. The key with the statutory framework for impact fees lays out the minimum requirements, but at its core, what you have to be able to do in order to enact an impact fee is show that there's a rational nexus between the fee that you're collecting and the infrastructure that you're trying to improve. And there are statutory definitions of infrastructure, certainly water and sewer pipes, pump stations of the like would qualify. The way that is normally done, you accomplish that, is there are consultants who do studies that determine what your needs are, how much you need to collect, and how that should be allocated amongst the payers. And that is the first step for justifying that rational nexus, the amount that you're collecting versus the infrastructure that needs the improvements. At a minimum, you have to provide for accounting, reporting impact fee collections. You have to provide notice at least 90 days before the effective date of the implementing ordinance. So, I mean, the notice provisions will not be a problem because in all likelihood what will happen is if it's the council's will, the city will go through a procurement process to select somebody to do the impact fee study, and that'll be the basis on which we create this framework going forward. It's important to note that it won't apply to pending applications when it's enacted, so if somebody's here, statute doesn't allow it to apply to them. You know, and that, I mean, that's basically it. We do have them for other, you know, we have them for parks now, we have them for police now. So it's not something that's foreign to us. We're just going through the process for the water and for implementing for water and sewer. And while the county does address certain things, we have our own infrastructure needs. So that's the need for, you know, whether it be pump stations, whether it be, you know, internal pipes within the city boundaries that we're responsible for. That's what we'll be focusing on.
So when you say pending applications would be exempt, what do you mean by pending applications?
The statute says that new or increased impact fees may not apply to current or pending permit applications submitted before the effective date of the new impact fee.
Permit, not land use. Building permit, not land use.
Permit.
Okay. Which kind of explains why in the past there has been a moratorium enacted at some level or another in connection with the study of impact fees. I know 22 years ago, we did that because once your permit's in, you're exempt from anything that's enacted during the pendency of your permit. I'd ask the manager, do we have any idea in-house, in terms of what it costs per gallon to do upgrades to the system, lift stations? Or I guess we'd have to defer to Public Works.
Not a per gallon amount, no, sir.
Because isn't that how it's calculated, though? If the pump's running a certain amount of time and the pump's rated at a given capacity, Durham comes in and ends the ability to add more gallonage?
Correct. Yes, if they're exceeding their capacity, or I believe it's like an 11-hour stretch, continuous, that's when Durham comes in and says, hey, listen, your lift station is exceeding its capacity. So at that point, an analysis is done by staff to see what upgrade needs to be done to address that deficiency, right? And that's currently what's happened with Pump Station 22. They've already done the engineering and they're doing all the planning right now so they could get the construction documents in place so that they could go ahead and improve that lift station. But as $1 per gallon, I'm sure we can extrapolate something, but off the top of our heads.
Just,
no.
it would make sense that, okay, we're gonna increase the capacity of Pump Station 22. And the cost of the increase of that capacity is estimated at $4.5 million. What I don't know is how many gallons more of capacity we're gonna create for that $4.5 million. So that's what I meant, that some of
Okay.
those numbers are in-house now. We just have to plug them into the
And-
equation.
Yes,
We can get that for you.
we can certainly run the numbers. I just want to point out that for instance, with Pump Station 22, there are additional downstream improvements, upgrading what it was a gravity main to a force main that may not be an apples to apples comparison across the board. You may have another area where you just need to increase the size of the pipe. So that being said, we will run the numbers, but I wanted just to clarify that point.
I guess what I'm looking for tonight is just a discussion as to whether or not we want to go down the road of the long process of establishing and enacting those fees, and do we build in protection from being at a point where, well, everybody's pulled their permits if we don't enact some level of moratorium. That's the discussion I'm looking for tonight, as to whether we're gonna build a fund to maintain and expand, to ensure that we have the capacity for, and particularly commercial development in the future. Mr.
As
Manager?
for the impact fees, Mayor, I don't think there's an issue actually doing the analysis for water, wastewater. I would actually go do one for solid waste impact fee as well. I know we keep talking about a transfer station. That would be perfect. So we could collect funds for that construction. In addition to that, our current impact fees, police, parks, and et cetera, are so old. I think you mentioned 22 years ago, if you recall.
Probably 2002, 2003,
Okay,
when I
so-
was privy to that.
So I think it would be in the city's best interest to go ahead and get that updated, because I'm sure we're losing monies here, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of impact fees.
We're losing opportunity. It just, as we had the discussion with the ARC Fund, that it's probably been, I think, 8 to 12 years since that's been updated. Mr. Vice Mayor?
I wanted to ask, what type of safeguards can we put in place, or technology, so that we don't get to the position where we are over capacity without knowing far in advance that that's going to happen?
See, the challenge there, Vice Mayor, is this. You have a pump station that's running, right? Today, everything's fine. It's not exceeding capacity. Tomorrow, a hospital opens up, right? And that's a big draw on the capacity for that pump station, but yet it doesn't go over. And then one day, you know, the mayor mentioned Sunny Lee, that they have some additional bays that are not being used right now. But initially, when they went to Durham, right, to get their approvals for the capacity, they might have said, hey, this is an office, right? It's a travel agency office, got one bathroom, not a big deal. They're fine. They submitted their application to Durham. They look at it and said, hey, there's sufficient capacity here. Time passes by. A few years go by and says, hey, you know what? I want to open up a restaurant. Now you have a problem, right? And that's what tipped it over the edge, right? And so we can go to every single pump station in the city and say, let's upgrade them all. So make sure we never run into this problem. But the mayor touched on it. We're talking over $4 million just to upgrade a pump station. So you can't say, hey, let's go upgrade this one over here and spend $4 million and never really need that capacity. Now, this isn't unique to us. It's happening in the county as well for their pump stations. If I'm not mistaken, I think Julio told me they might have 15 or 20 pump stations that are a moratorium on their own, right? So it's not unique to the city, but I'm happy to say that at least in terms of pump station 22, we're on our way, and the pump station is deemed to will be operational prior to the ALF opening up. Okay, so it should not impact them. With regarding to the 7-Eleven, I think they're going to do a septic tank in the interim, so at least they'll be able to operate. But it's a challenge. We can get all our resources, our limited resources, and then say apply it to this pump station. But in the end, you might never really need that capacity, and it ends up being over here, and you've spent the few resources you have to do that upgrade.
Okay, does the city collect data over a long period of time so that we can analyze the data, learn from it, become a smarter city, a more sustainable, a more efficient? 'Cause I know other cities, they collect data over a 5-year period. They analyze all that data so that these types of problems don't occur, because they've put safeguards in place and they're analyzing data to say, oh, if a hospital is going to come, obviously that might get us real close to capacity. We don't ever want to be real close to capacity.
Right.
So that we don't have this issue that a business comes here and then all of a sudden we can't open up bays. So can we maybe do a study or start looking into how to become a smarter city? And that's all assets or all facets of the city are starting to integrate with each other.
So I understand where you're coming from. You want to be proactive, and definitely we're always acquiring data. In terms of this type of issue, I'd have to, my apologies, I'd have to talk to Julio. Unfortunately, he had to go home today, wasn't feeling well. But definitely let me see if they do future projections, and I'll definitely get that information to council so you guys know.
How many lift stations are over capacity in the city of Homestead?
I want to say 2. I know pump station 22, and I believe there's another one.
What's the other one? What parts of the city are they in? Are they over by Racetrack? Are they over on the northwest side?
Southwest.
Well, yeah. And again, as we're talking about the Triangle property, just itself, the county RTZ parcel, you know, those several hundred units are all going to that Southwest pump station.
So if July comes around, the Senate Bill 102 and all this new density, every pump station will be.
Pump station may help you.
Okay, I do recall, I think it was Michelle that was answering. Having the developer make the infrastructure upgrade instead of paying the impact fee, but the impact fee goes to Miami-Dade County.
There's 2 jurisdictions that a developer pays impact fees to. The city for a nominal fee for public works, a fee for parks, and a nominal fee for PD. The applicants also pay impact fees to the county. And there is a very long list of impact fees. It's like 20 pages of what they have to pay to the county.
Okay, so let's say that there are going to be 2 or 3 new projects near a pump station that's over capacity. Can we require that developer, the first one, to charge him a pro rata share of $4 million that it costs to upgrade that?
So
Basically asking them to upgrade our system, even though it's not a requirement in their application.
So under the way the code is currently written, it provides for the applicant to pay for the infrastructure connection needs. There's also a mechanism that allows for an applicant to perform upgrades and then receive later reimbursements from users that come in later and tie into that infrastructure. So in this case, if you had someone come in, you had a pump station in moratorium, the city did not have the resources to upgrade it at the time, that applicant could come in and say, okay, I'm gonna perform the upgrades and then later get reimbursed for the additional users that tie in. A lot of times they don't want to do that. For obvious reasons, it could be many years before they receive the return on investment. So that's the current structure that's available.
Do we currently allow developers to create private lift stations on
No.
their property?
No. County does not allow, well, you can create a lift station for your own property, but you cannot create a monopoly. So your lift station cannot tie into the adjacent property owner, because then that becomes a public facility. Sorry.
She is correct. If you recall, the old 7-Eleven that was on US 1, they had to do their own private lift station there for themselves.
So if you have adjacent lots, and you might be landlocked, and the first developer established a lift station, so the developer that comes behind him, if he has to connect there, who establishes those fees?
You would have to create the code also stipulates that if you build your own lift station and the city upgrades its own infrastructure, by code, the developer is supposed to tie into the municipal infrastructure within 90 days of that going live. My department doesn't track that, so I can't give you specifics, but the intent is for the city to provide the infrastructure, not for there to be private lift stations throughout the city.
And I believe, Vice Mayor, to answer your question, I believe at Waterstone, a lift station was actually built by the developer, and then they handed it over to the city once they were completed with the project.
Okay, so we've got our pump station, and we have private lift stations all throughout the city. Okay, is there any way I could get a copy of that, like, see what that looks like?
Yep, we'll put
Infrastructure?
something together and we'll send it to all of council, so you can see the location of the lift stations.
Looks like a spaghetti model at hurricane season. Councilman Fletcher.
Thank you. I could have answered some of your questions before you asked them. I took the time and I spent about an hour with Julio here a month or two ago in regard specifically to pump station 22, because there was a couple of folks looking for property that they were willing to pay for the pump station to be repaired or fixed. I would ask each of you, take the time to go sit and talk with Julio about the pump stations. There's like 89 in the city. And once this one is upgraded, that side of the city's in very good shape for the next 20, 25 years, based on current numbers. Now, who knows what happens after that. He's more concerned about the west side of town and the aging of that. But the one thing I wanted to bring up is that, you know, the opportunity's there for these businesses to help offset that cost if they choose to do that. But a lot of them don't want to have that, you know, as part of their overall capital outlay either. So that impacts a large area. And we're doing downstream upgrades as well. But take the time and sit with Julio, and he'll give you that wonderful colored map. that make your eyes go cross real quick.
Appreciate it. Thanks. So, yeah, my point was, is that we discovered that we're not collecting enough money for the electrical hookups, and we're not collecting anything to help build capacity in the future for wastewater. Councilman Roth?
Thank you. So, what do other municipalities charge for impact fees? Do we know? Or is that something you can get us?
I don't
I'm sure
know,
the
but-
county already has a built-in one for the developer to build in the city. Because they control the DERM aspects of the developer. Even a simple business in the city, a commercial business wants to open up, has to go through the county to make sure that they're not exceeding capacity.
So I don't think you're going to get an apples to apples comparison. It's why the studies are required, because it's supposed to be based on localized information and needs. So I imagine that there's a pretty wide array if you go, you know, certainly with the county, but even municipality to municipality, there's going to be differences based on the needs. But they're all, I think they're usually calculated by ERU.
Yeah, I would agree with Matt. And so if you look at a city like Doral that's only been incorporated for 23 years, their needs are going to be significantly less because their infrastructure is relatively new. Our city has been incorporated for over 100 years, so we're going to have sections of the city like the Southwest, areas of the Northwest that have really old infrastructure and would require some upgrades. It's like Matt said, it's not an apples to apples comparison. So it is based on need.
Right, so we kind of learned from the moratorium that was put in place in the Southwest section. That was a forced moratorium by Durham. So, and do they still have that same control over our upgrades and improvements to lift stations today? Because they held up the permit process for the Southwest lift stations and capacity.
I think you're talking about Pump Station 1. Until that actual pump station got upgraded, you're correct. No additional water capacity or sewer was allowed. So there was a moratorium on businesses, and I believe that's why that 7-Eleven, which now has become, I think, like a little medical center on US 1, had to actually build its own lift station so they can actually go into operation,
Right,
if
and-
I remember correctly.
And did O'Reilly's Auto Parts have to do the same?
No.
They tied into Pump Station 1. They held their permit and waited for Pump Station 1 to come live.
So they built the building and waited
Mhm.
to be connected. So they just kind of gambled on when that would happen. So I guess my point is, when it comes to DERM and us collecting the impact fees, if a unit goes at capacity or over capacity, similar to what happened in the Southwest section, they held up that whole process for us for 3 to 4 years, where we couldn't do anything. They wouldn't even give us the permit to improve it. What was there, and you couldn't exceed the limit until they agreed that we could increase the capacity on that particular lift station.
You're correct, Councilman. I mean, the fine details I can't recall right now. But yes, there was a lot of going back and forth with the county. I remember actually the council going and talking to Mayor Jimenez, trying to get this stuff going. So yes, once Durham puts its foot down and says, that's it, no new development until the pump station capacity is increased, it's the final word, so.
Yeah, because, I mean, granted, the Northwest and the Southwest are going to need a lot more attention before the East Side does. I mean, I'm assuming that there's tremendous amounts of leaks, both on the water side and the sewer side, as it comes into the city and then as the water goes out to the residents. So that's another huge infrastructure issue we're going to look at going down the road. And I'm okay with doing these studies and whatnots for the impact fees Because as we've already begun to do the electrical portion of it, because they weren't paying for those things and the upgrades and all that stuff. So the bottom line is it just makes housing more expensive, you know, for residents. But it's a necessary evil because we can't provide the service if we don't have the equipment to do so. So, you know, I'm good for the study. The moratorium portion of it is a little concerning to me, but as far as finding out what we can legally charge developers for that portion of it, and obviously we'll have to do a better job in forecasting in the future for the maintenance of our systems as well. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Ross. So, yeah, Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the list of the impact fees that the county charges, how often is that list updated? Like, do they change the list frequently, or has it been kind of steady? Do we not know?
I don't know.
Okay. Because I'm curious to, then I really think, not that I'm curious, I want to make sure that they're not charging impact fees that really should be coming to us. I mean, it's possible.
We could definitely take a look at
Please
it, but
take
their
a look.
impact fees are their impact fees, and our impact fees are our impact fees. So, but that, we could definitely double check, and we could find out
You
when
said
they
there's
were
like
last
20
updated.
pages, right? Is what you said, of impact fees?
I'm not sure the
And we
exact
have,
page
like,
count, but it's
3?
pretty long.
So we have like a handful of impact fees, and the county has 20 pages? This is,
Let me just
It's
throw one
very
thing in there,
off
that thought you have going on. Because when Sweet Jaylene's tried to open up, in their package, there was like $80,000 worth of impact fees that were going to the county.
And the county then denied it.
And then they said, no, that's not true. But yeah, it was true. But I think something happened, and I don't know what happened. But that's the extent of it. I mean, $80,000 for her to open up a little 2,500 square foot space in downtown Homestead. It just didn't make any sense.
yeah, so I'd like a synopsis and a clear understanding, and I think it's good for all of us to know why we only have 3 impact fees and they've got 20 pages. And then with regards to those reimbursements, so you were saying that if they were to privately invest and upgrade and then get reimbursed later, do they get interest on that?
No, remember, the example I gave, which I believe was Waterstone, they were having an issue with sewer, if I'm not mistaken. So as part of their development to get the approvals, they actually had to build the lift station. So once it was up, according to our design, by the way, once it's up and running, they literally hand it over to the city, and then we go ahead and run it from that point.
Right, so that was one example, but in another example, if somebody wanted to tie into a lift station that needed $1 million of upgrades, and they wanted to front the money and get it done and get reimbursed later, do they get interest on that?
Under my reading of the code, I don't believe so. I think that they are only entitled to reimbursements from users that come online after them. So they would then pay for their share of the use of that new infrastructure.
Okay, is that maybe something we can explore to try to incentivize the, if you know, the expedition of these repairs on our lift stations and make it, you know, an opportunity for partnership to get these things fixed faster and then maybe give them a little bit of a royalty until they get paid off?
We could definitely look into it, and I want to say it was Homestead Pavilion, when they first came online, they actually had to put the infrastructure in, and then as new businesses started coming in, they had to start paying back into what they had initially had put on. But that's something we could definitely look at.
Yeah, and as I recall, Waterstone, with the original development of Waterstone, it was the same situation. And just, Councilwoman, my personal knowledge of 2 scenarios where developers and businesses fronted the entire infrastructure and relied on the city to police that agreement as other users came online. Neither of those came to any good end. It just was not well policed. So I don't think that anyone who's aware of our history with that is going to be willing to front under that scenario and rely upon payment, pro
What a
rata
shame.
payment from future
shame.
users. And one day when we bulldoze City Hall, I'll find the agreement between the First National Bank and the city where others were supposed to pay in for what the bank did, and somehow it was lost in the basement over there. Plus water. Yeah, there's a lot of things in that basement.
And then, so I'd like a review of that as well. Let's see, how can we maybe correct the errors of our way and make this something that can actually work for us? And then with regards to the analysis, do we really have to hire a very expensive consultant? How about we, give Julio Brea a new title? I think isn't he qualified to tell us what we need?
No, this is, in matter of correct, it's very specialized. This is not, you just grab somebody and throw them into a cube and have them do the analysis. So it's very specialized, and we'd have to go out there and find somebody to go ahead and do that work.
Can we also request maybe do a public record request to find out what the consultant for Miami-Dade County that came up with 20 pages of impact fees, charges, and maybe they can give us a price?
Definitely, we would go out, the first thing we would do is tell procurement, go out there and see any similar solicitations that have gone out. So hopefully somebody's gone ahead and done it recently, so then we can go ahead and reach out to that entity to go ahead and have them do the work. So, and before we get off of this, so when I'm gathering, we're okay with doing the impact fee analysis, whether it's in-house or out-house, right? Or not, that's a terrible phrase,
That's
sorry.
a good pun for this
Sorry.
discussion.
Sorry about that. Or, but including.
across the board.
Across the board, right.
Across the board.
Updating the ones we have, including the solid waste impact fee as well as water and wastewater impact
Adding
fees.
water and wastewater.
Yes.
And reviewing the park impact fees, and
Oh, yeah,
maybe
that-
we'll end
that's
up
what I
with
mean.
20 pages too. Okay.
Everything we have, and we'll actually look at the county list as well, and maybe there's something in there that we can grab onto as well.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things to add. Definitely we need to look at this study, but at the same time, we're just talking about incentivizing new businesses. So just a way to make it fair. And to consider maybe forming a resolution that will help protect any companies that come in and front that money. Because in lieu of a moratorium, let's use it in our interest, in our best interest if it's possible. That if there is a business wanting to come in to front it, then fantastic, that solved a lot of issues. And if they don't want to, they're not able to build right now. So if there's a way of doing both of those things, just in case there's something on the line that could help us with that issue.
We'd definitely look at that, and I think the important thing to keep in mind here, if I recall correctly, Pump Station 1, the downtown is on Pump Station 1, and with that upgrade, we have capacity for years. So bringing in these new businesses should not be an issue.
Right, and I think this is a very timely conversation across the board. And I don't recall what context it was in, but recently some information was distributed about it was in the context of the partial garbage privatization, where Development Services gave us some build-out numbers that I think we were all blown away by the additional number of potential units. So we're not talking about a relatively few dollars here. We're talking about the difference between having a world-class park system and having the park system we have now, for example, and better garbage service. So I believe, if there are no objections, you've got your consensus to go forward with that study. And am I correct that there's no consensus to have any discussion on a moratorium except on my part to move forward with any of these? So I got a lot of nervous giggles,
Well,
so I'll take that.
No,
as
I did want to ask.
No, that's what I was saying is, if we are not in a good position right now to allow a business to start, we don't want to take away from any small business that might want to do a change of use. So instead of using the word moratorium, what if we do something very strict and it just states that in order to build something, that they would need to help with making the capacity, helping with the capacity increase.
I get where you're going, but isn't it accurate to say at this point that right now, there's a very limited area of you can't do a change of use or you can't open a new business because of the pump station failure. That, and I guess probably what you're getting at is if someone, our situation now is not generally going to prevent even a big restaurant from coming downtown. We do have that capacity.
Yes.
But what this does is if they come in between now and the enactment of the fee without a moratorium, there's no opportunity to capture those dollars to be sure that the next guy coming in has capacity without waiting for it. But was that kind of where you were going?
So are we thinking that we're going to get this analysis next month's meeting? Would it be a 1 month? No. So that's what I'm saying. In the meantime, instead of hurting any businesses that we currently have, this moratorium would serve for any new businesses, correct? Or change of use as well?
Well, if I wasn't contemplating change of use, it would be, I think in terms generally, can you charge impact fees on a change of use or is it new construction?
I need to look into that.
So I was just throwing it out there because after Matt mentioned that we have to justify what we're collecting, that might be something that we can put in the language to make sure that we're not hurting ourselves anymore. But if that development comes in that wants to help fix these issues, that we have that as an option.
Yes.
My brain had to process, sorry. You can. So, like in the case of Sweet Jaylene's, she had to pay impact fees because it went from an office use to a bakery use, and that change necessitated an impact to the system.
So, for example, and in the hypothetical world of talking about a moratorium, could you make that distinction between new construction and change of use?
Durham makes that distinction. Durham will say...
No, our local impact fees as it relates to a moratorium. That can we make that distinction between new construction and anything else that triggers the payment of impact fees?
You're talking about we're going to put a pin in the impact fee discussion. Strictly moratorium. Can we craft a moratorium that permits change of use but excludes any new development?
Well,
Is that the goal?
either way you wanted to do it, you either enact it against new development and not everything else, which is probably where we go. You wouldn't want to hurt existing structures. Can we make that distinction generally?
To be honest, I'll have to do some research. I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
Are you considering moratorium specifically where the pump stations are at capacity or citywide?
I was considering citywide because as we are primed for redevelopment and potential density Armageddon, it's going to be citywide in terms of needing to have funds to create additional capacity across the board.
I know that the last time the word moratorium was circling around, it really hurt us. It hurt our ability to attract business, so I don't think it's the right word to use. So if we could,
Also,
if we would
I've heard
consider-
you say that before, and I'm really curious as to the real facts behind that. I mean, certainly I had 3 developers attorneys call me bouncing off the ceilings on Friday night when this agenda came out, and I talked them off the cliff. So let's have a true narrative here. I think that we all deserve real facts rather than just saying it hurts us, because it hurts us to do nothing and not build in a way to have funds available for capacity and infrastructure in the future.
With all due respect, Mayor, you didn't let me finish. What I wanted to say was, why don't we limit it to the 2 pump stations that are at capacity while we can still continue to have economic development in the areas that,
It's already on moratorium. Pump Station 22 is already on moratorium. The other pump station, I believe, is under analysis right now, if I'm not mistaken, all right?
So that's
it might-
Durham-imposed
and-
moratorium.
Right, right. So Durham is like, hey, provide us the numbers, let's look and make a decision. But 22, right there, anybody who's on that line, whether it's Sunny Lee trying to do a change of use, he can't. And once again, the 7-Eleven that's coming online as well, but they've decided, hey, we're just gonna do,
Septic tank.
a septic tank, right? And so that's what they're moving.
Right.
Now, the
And-
ALF, once again, they're so far out, about a year and a half out, we'll have the pump station up and running before they come online, so it shouldn't impact them.
And just by way of example, and correct me if your recollection is different, Mr. Manager, Sunny Lee was considering installing a temporary septic tank. It would have been about $350,000.
I can't remember the number, but yes,
In
that
that
was one of their,
neighborhood,
yeah, that was one of their
which would have had to have been abandoned when the moratorium was lifted. Obviously, for whatever reason, they opted not to do that. Just to give you an idea of the financial magnitude of these issues.
but don't we have in our procedures where if somebody submits an application to Development Services, we've got to get a sewer capacity certification before it goes to Durham? Is that the way it works?
So how our process works is when you're in your entitlement phase, site planning, we accept your application, we type up a letter for Durham Fire. The applicant takes that letter and submits plans electronically to Durham Fire at the county. So as we're going through our site planning process, they're reviewing capacity. We also do the same thing with the school district. They then issue us either response comments, an approval, or a denial. It's called a municipal site plan review. So we take that letter, and that's how I get somebody on a council agenda, or I approve something administratively. Me, Development Services. Then, when you file for your building permits, you then go to Durham again, Durham Fire. It's a separate section at Durham Fire that then reviews the building permits. They do a different layer of reviews that's more intense than the municipal site plan review. You then get your approval, denial, conditions, etc. Then when you come back, let's say it's commercial, you come back for business licensing, we'll use Sunny Lee as an example. There's another section at Durham and Fire that again do a whole nother review for business licensing. So depending on where you are in the process, there are different review types that occur with Durham Fire at every single stage. Without those approvals, we as a local government, consistent with our interlocal agreements with the county, cannot issue our approvals if we don't have the Durham Fire approvals.
So when internally in our department, do we require, because I know the business licensing, they require a sewer capacity certification that needs to go to the Public Works Department, get signed off on, get notarized.
It's a sewer allocation letter. And so the sewer allocation letter will say there is a water main or a sewer main that's available 10 feet from the property line. Then the applicant takes that sewer allocation letter, goes to Durham and says, here's my sewer allocation letter, I want to tie into the system. And they bring in from the property line to wherever their connection is on site, the pipe
So
or the infrastructure.
That letter doesn't give us any indication of capacity at all. It just says you are close to a connection.
There is a connection available X feet away from your property. And then Durham is the overriding jurisdiction that will say, okay, pump station 35 has significant capacity for you to tie into that pump station.
Okay. Councilwoman Avila?
Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm all about making sure we have the ability to help incentivize business, make the process efficient with Development Services, keep it top of mind with regards to how can we, cut the cost for build out and, creating budgets and utilizing federal funds and ARPA funds and all these funds. but people still have to pay their fair share with the impact fees and how it impacts our community, whether it's art, parks, water, electric. So, police at the top of that list. With regards to, stopping business permits, building permits until we figure out how to charge and collect, I don't really like that path. I respect the idea because they have to pay their fair share and we need to make this a priority, but I don't like the path that this would take us. So I really want to make it, a task for, city staff to get the right people in place as quickly as possible, to do their analysis, try to figure out the fastest way they can do it. The county figures out how to do these things faster than we can even blink. Look, we got a bill on our table in less than a week. It's like, but we're going to take months to figure out our capacity requirements and how we have to charge for impacts. Why isn't this like percentage based on your square footage and your water bill? Is that, you're shaking your head, yes, it's probably what it is, but we need a consultant to tell us that. Julio can tell us that.
Well, no, they're generally based on ERUs, equivalent residential unit measurements.
Yeah, I just don't think it's rocket science that we have to drag not that we're dragging our feet, but that we have to allow other people to drag us, so far to get the answers we need to make the decisions we have to make. So I'm all in favor for the impact fees. I don't want to stop the flow of our business permits. Let's just do our job to get it done as quickly as possible so we can capture as much as we can. And I'll leave it at that, Mayor. Thank you.
And look, I see, the M word's going nowhere. I get that. But I want to be clear, this is not targeted to businesses. This would have been across the board. Housing developers also impact our system and impede our ability to have further development. So I just want to be clear on that. Okay, so Mr. Manager, you have the direction that you needed.
Yes, sir, I have my direction. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, and again, following what the councilwoman said, I would think it would be easier to calculate and determine some fees than others, and we don't have to have everything in at once. If we can, kind of sequentially do this rather than as one package.
We can expedite the water and sewer.
Let's
work.
do that. Let's don't let anything get away anymore. At budget time, I don't want to have to ask, where's the red ink going? I want to know that we're capturing everything we need to capture. Yes, sir.
One more comment. Matt, you mentioned that there's a 90-day notice for something.
It's for implementation. We are not there yet. By the time it's drafted and we have by the time the study's completed and the ordinance is drafted, we will have ample time to provide the notice.
So we can't put out a notice prior to having those fees and figures in place?
Well, they'll be incorporated in whatever it is that we're going to adopt.
But do they need to
And
be
we don't-
incorporated, or can we just put a notice out that there are impact fees coming to be announced, or whatever, however you want to phrase that? So there is no time lost when it comes to the notification process. Because if it takes us
I
3 or 4
understand.
months to get to that point, and then it's another 90 days after that,
The statute itself doesn't say, but I will take a look and see if there's a way that we can expedite it and run them concurrently.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Good, thank you. Before we move on, could I entertain a motion to extend to 9:15? Moved by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilwoman Avila, who's itching to get back to Harrisfield and finish setting up. I can tell. I know the feeling. Been here at auction time and seafood time. Okay, all in favor? Okay, the next item is item 5. That would be a discussion about initiating the prohibition of the parking or storage of any RV type vehicle, anything that's meant to live in a residentially zoned area. I think illegal occupancies are out of control, and anything we can do to put another arrow in our quiver of enforcement we can do that. Now, bear in mind, as we all know, our agenda items have to be turned in a week before the council meeting. So this was first submitted a couple of weeks ago. And kind of thinking through it, and I don't think I've even posed this to Matt, to Mr. Pearl yet, I know I have to Jerry, that perhaps implement some sort of permit mechanism to allow the owner of the property to obtain a free permit to store a personally owned RV there. But the kicker would be that the issuance of that permit would be conditioned upon their agreement that we get to inspect, that we can come in on any complaint and determine whether someone was living in the unit. Right now, I think we all know that our code enforcement and our police departments are very constrained, that unless they visually, on their own, see those occupancies, or a gate happens to be open, it's without the consent of the property owner or the person occupying the property, you don't get to go in. So if not an outright prohibition, at least give the owner of the property the opportunity to store, but with that caveat that they would consent to a review. So I'd kick off that discussion. Councilman Fletcher?
Be happy to. I'm more than willing to support the latter part of your discussion in regards to having the permit and us being able to do it. A complete prohibition is just not in my wheelhouse. You know, people have certain rights. They own their property. They should be able to store certain things on their property. Agreed, not letting other people live in them, but I'm all about supporting the permit and the ability for us to go and inspect at a later time. So
How
I'd
would
be
that,
happy to support
how would that, does that pass constitutional or statutory muster, Mr. Pearl?
If you make it an obligation for the permit, I'm not sure. This is the first time that you broached that subject. I want to remind people of a couple of things. First, at a prior council meeting, the one before last, we were instructed to start preparing regulations for the storage because, as you all know now, our code is silent to this. And so as we went down that road, we looked at the county regulations. You know, within our own ordinance, the draft that we have prepared, there's a specific prohibition on occupancy of any stored RVs on site. One of the issues that we ran into when we were trying to finalize this was a practical one, which was you have to create a legal method of ingress and egress, and in some instances, people had them behind slatted fences that should be grounded and secured. Clearly, they must have been removed in order to get them back and forth. And so we've been working with staff on trying how to tackle that particular issue. I can look into the permit issue. I also wanted to speak to, because I know that this has come up in the illegal residency before, just today, and I haven't had a chance to work with the police department. Yesterday, I was doing a little more research on the concept of inspection warrants, which are a specific type of warrant for searches dealing with violations of city codes, zoning regulations, housing regulations, things of that nature. There are requirements to get those warrants. You still need just cause. You have to show that the inspection was already refused by the property owner, and there are owner-occupied residences are excluded from that section in terms of going in somebody's own home. I mentioned it to the colonel before the meeting. I'm going to get with them to work through that process to see if there is something there that we can rely on to address your underlying concern.
Oh, and those are great dual tracks, you know, and certainly the discussion we had 6 or 8 weeks ago, whenever it was, about addressing the location of the storage. You know, this item, the permit theory does, you know, that would
I
impact
will have
that.
to do some research
Yeah.
on the permit theory. This is the first I've heard of it, and whether you are, I don't want to go too far into the analysis, but there are specific questions I think that we would have to answer before we make it a condition of the permit itself.
Let me be blunt. Our ungated communities across the board are going to hell quickly.
I understand.
Because owners and tenants, for whatever reason, are monetizing their backyards, and it is to the detriment of those of us who choose not to live in gated communities and who have some neighborhood pride. And the chief said it the other day in a neighborhood meeting. These people don't care. Well, I do, and I hope my colleagues do as well. So is there a consensus to have Mr. Pearl look into these permit and, you know, kind of waiving the access rights, or?
Well, I would think that Mr. Pearl would definitely look at private property rights when it comes to, you know, people's rights to have properties.
And that's the analysis that we have to undertake here. You know, there's the constitutional rights to, you know, to privacy and whether we can do certain inspections. And I don't know if making it a condition compelling somebody to do that would.
Right now, we have a prohibition against people living in the backyard without a way to enforce it. I'm looking for a way to enforce that prohibition.
I agree with you, Mayor. I don't want people, you know, living in RVs. But I also don't think that getting rid of RVs completely is the right approach. We can't think that
We've moved away
everyone
from that in this discussion.
is a bad apple. But that's the message that we're sending here tonight.
No, we've moved away from an absolute prohibition in the discussion and moved toward the inquiry as to permits with the waiver of the right to privacy.
And I'm happy to explore it, but I can't give you a definitive answer right now.
Okay. So,
I have a
Mr.
question.
Roth.
I have a
Yes,
question.
Councilman Roth.
Aside from the RVs, is there any way we can find out the most recent issues we've had was not only the RVs, but they were living in storage sheds and containers. So, if we're actually going after illegal housing of people, we need to find a way to make sure that the storage sheds have been permitted. I don't know how we do that legally. And if there's any weird storage containers in the back, that those are inspected as well. Because I know we had a couple houses over in the northwest section that were, people were living in storage sheds, containers, and RVs. So if we're gonna tackle this problem, let's figure out ways to tackle the whole problem. I don't think you really want to restrict people from storing RVs. You want to restrict them from allowing people to live in the RVs, which I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that. But I think the problem is bigger than just the RVs. I think it's the storage containers. I think it's sheds. It's illegal wiring to these units. It's illegal plumbing that's hooked up to these units. It's all of those aspects that, quite frankly, an RV is much safer to live in than a storage shed in a container. So, I mean, but we don't want it happening.
But all of this goes to our garbage capacity. When you got
there's a lot
those
of things, yeah.
25 folks living in the sheds in the backyard,
Yeah.
it goes to our ability to finish the route without having to go off the route and empty that garbage truck,
It also contributes to our sewer capacity issues.
as well as it's dark and it's sad.
It is.
But when we know what the backgrounds of the folks were in that particular backyard, those conditions also engender trafficking.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to do whatever we can
I
to
agree.
suppress all of that
I agree.
and to protect law-abiding homeowners from the scourge of what's going on throughout the Northwest, throughout the ungated communities. Councilwoman.
Is there a way to require the permit if your property is less than a certain size, where we can try to, carve out those larger properties, whether it's a builder's half acre or larger? I think that the RV in the backyard with a family living in it or individual living in it, I think that's a symptom of other socioeconomic issues. They're probably also parking in the swale. They're also probably, illegally dumping in front of their house. They're also probably not maintaining their home up to code conditions. So I think that if we crack down on a lot of our code issues in general, it will help to weed out certain characteristics of individuals that are living in
But-
these types of situations or that
But
are
with
fostering
respect to
them.
lot size, we have these same complaints from Westbury Estates and Redland Reef and Redland's Edge. It's across the socioeconomic spectrum. And as incredible as it sounds, with home prices as high as they are, there's a lot of homes that are rentals with rentals in the back. You know, it's not just limited to people trying to make ends meet who live in that home. It's those who are really monetizing the heck out of that rental by creating those units in the backyard. So it's everywhere.
So to that point, is the permit fee and permit process intended to be, prohibitive? Or is it meant to try to get as many RVs registered as possible with the city so that you can then execute
That's-
a right to search?
That is my intent, and I use the word free in talking to the manager about this. This is to create that ability to get in that backyard and see what else is going on. There are a lot of backyards that have occupied metal sheds and RVs. So if we can, and then they're not hard to spot. So even if they're behind a fence and code enforcement rides by and puts in their computer an address and sees no permit for an RV, you can then start the enforcement process. But the permit process that I've kind of envisioned would allow us to get behind that gate by virtue of the consent contained in the permit application.
Okay, so if we were to be in consensus tonight to continue to explore, it's not a vote to implement, but it's a vote to allow him to
Simply
come
to
back.
explore. Vice Mayor.
This is, I want to understand where we're at with code on this, because as we are trying to finalize legislation on RVs, what is code doing in the meantime? Because then if they're in limbo, they don't know what to do or what to cite, or so what is code doing during this time that we're going through this process?
If you're asking what we're currently doing, and we get a complaint, if somebody's living in an RV, we'll go ahead and try to, get an observation or do a knock and talk and see if they'll actually let us, come in and take a look. We've been successful in that particular case before. But if you're saying that, if I'm understanding, if you're starting a process of changing the whole code, I don't know if that, I'd have to ask the attorney, but whether we would have to actually stop any further enforcement of that while this is all being sorted out.
Correct.
Unless it is a life safety issue.
Good point. So,
But wait, to clarify, there is no current code provision for the storage of RV-type vehicles in a residential yard. You've just not, so it's not allowed, but it's not prohibited either. Typically, our attorneys want us to take the position that if the code doesn't say you can do it, you can't do it. But we've, and I don't mean this demeaningly, turned a blind eye to RVs. And the issue that the Vice Mayor brought forward several weeks ago addressed the locational aspects of commercial vehicle parking. This really had nothing to do with the occupancy. Occupancy has never been permitted.
but also if they go out and cite an RV for whatever reason that they can cite them for now, then that person goes to the special master, and it just turns into a real convoluted process because we haven't given our staff direction on exactly how we want them to proceed yet.
I don't agree with that. Let me ask. Are RVs, are unoccupied RV citations being written right now? If they're in the backyard?
Yes, and it was based upon where the location of the RV was.
But if it's behind the house, you're not, even though the code doesn't allow for it specifically?
If it's behind the house, they're good.
Okay.
But as long as there's some sort of buffer, like a privacy fence or something that is, blocking it. Obviously, 12-foot, you can't have a 12-foot privacy fence, and most of these RVs are at least 12-foot tall. But at least if there's some sort of provision to create a buffer. It was prohibited alongside of the house, directly alongside the house, like, a driveway that's going directly alongside
Which
it.
is in process at this point to resolve that.
Correct.
That's the direction we gave last month.
Yes, the location of the RVs, and to be clear, we have the code provisions speak to commercial vehicles, and it's kind of broad. We wanted to address, a more narrow issue with RVs. There was some interplay in the mobile home park regulation, so the ordinance that we contemplated, meeting before last, addresses location, occupancy, shielding of the RVs, and also does a little cleanup in the definitions and separating them from mobile homes in terms of the codified definitions, what can be where. Mobile homes in the mobile home parks, RVs over here. That was the direction that we got, and but for the ingress and egress issue, which were worked out, and we'll come back to you with. The permit issue is something new, and I totally understand where you're going and why, what the need is. It just requires a little research in terms of the constitutionality.
Okay.
So can we consider that the permit layer is just an additional layer to what they're already working on? So we can give code direction, Are we going to continue to allow them to enforce, or are we telling them to hold off until we finalize, what we are in agreement with when it comes to the RV situation?
Well, I think, the conversation we had last month, I would imagine that code is still enforcing improperly located vacant RVs, right? Pending the code change, correct? You're still dealing
Correct.
with those that aren't parked where they're supposed to be.
Correct. But again, if I can get further direction, if the code change process has already started taking place, we need direction on whether we're going to go ahead and stop any further enforcement or continue.
If they do enforce, again, it's going to get to the special master. Special master is going to say, or the person's going to come up here and say, I was told by the vice mayor that, or I heard that the vice mayor is working on amending the code, and then the special master is going to give him, 6 months.
But your code change was limited to on the side behind the front corner of the house.
Right.
And I don't know that we have the ability to make that direction. That's city manager and police chief and code enforcement discretion based upon, I guess, some discussion up here. But, that is a very narrow issue right now. The code change to permit behind and to the side, behind the front corner to the side. That's your concern now. And I don't know what you've been doing since we had that discussion.
So Mayor, they've been enforcing the code as written, right? Now, once again, the idea is to allow residents to park their RV on the side of the house, which there's going to be fencing requirements as well. That's not going away. So, once again, we haven't seen the final product yet either, but the assumption would be that if you're parking the RV in the back of your house, like most people are doing right now, you still have that fencing requirement, right? And unless you all foresee that going away,
And
I don't foresee that
we
going.
didn't address that. That's
Right.
not off the table.
So I would not tell code, hey, don't look at RVs, keep doing what you're doing until we got the final form of this product. And then at that point, they'll take the appropriate actions. Because once again, the fencing of an RV in the backyard
Not changing.
is not changing, right? And if somebody's just, the RV is sticking out anyways, they would be cited anyway. So I would let them to continue doing what they do. And if eventually the code does change, then when it comes to the special master, at that point, hey, you know, the code has changed, so, you know, don't worry about it, or whatever the special master would do at that point.
Or even hold it in abeyance until final reading.
That's a possibility, yes, sir.
So, we're gonna take the, all right, Councilwoman Bailey, you
Thank
have been
you.
patiently
Thank
waiting
you.
for 20
Thank you.
minutes.
I forgot half of it, but I got a couple of them.
Told you to write it.
So, as the code states right now, are RVs allowed in your driveway if they're small enough and they don't come out to the sidewalk?
No.
Nowhere in the city.
Correct. That was, in a previous council years ago, that was changed. There was an issue where there was RVs being parked in the driveway, and they were given provisions to move to the rear of the house.
Okay. And do we currently have any residences that have hookups for RVs? You know, are there any large lots that have hookups where they have,
Not legal.
Yeah, there shouldn't be. Now, if somebody got a permitted hookup to have an electrical outlet in the area of where that RV is, and if they use it to occasionally power the RV to go inside and clean, I don't think there's an issue with that, but they can't be using it to be powered up for living conditions.
okay. So how would this look once we look at what you find met? I just would like to make sure, and I'm sure you will, that as you're going around and you find people that need to fill out these permits, that they're issued a citation pending them issuing that, them getting that permit, right? It's not an
No,
instant.
I think we're talking about two different things. The citations were as to current conditions where some people just logistically, some logistically and some just didn't comply, were parking behind a fence but along the side of the house,
Okay.
which was not permitted. The code currently says it has to be behind the house. The pending code change would allow it to be on the side of the house behind a solid
fence.
fence, correct? Which is an entirely different issue from my proposal
Right.
of requiring the placement of the RV type situation to be with permit.
So anyone owning a RV and storing it at their home legally
Can do so now.
can do so now, but they would, if we decide to go through with this, then they would fill out this information so that we can just have those rights to come. Okay, so that answers some of the other questions with it not being in the driveway. So my ask is that if there are people facing housing issues, that we make sure that we're in touch with SOS and that we are helping as much as possible, because I know a few families and it's really rough right now.
No, absolutely.
Mayor.
And some of the one situation where we did work with the families to get them into housing.
I did want to ask if, are the water meters remote? Water meters?
Most of the water meters are, which are remote, but in the northwest, there's certain little gap areas where they still have to actually manually read them.
And this goes back to the whole technology thing. If there was a way for you to see an uptick in water consumption, then you'd say, oh, there's potentially additional people living there. And then, because if you have a leak in your toilet, you'll get that water bill, it'll come through real high, and then we're asking for credits. Or
Right.
the residents are asking for credits. So if there was a way to monitor if they all of a sudden had an uptick in water supply, then maybe we should drive by and take a look.
Yeah, notifications do go out to customers if there's a large increase in the water consumption or electric consumption. Same as the demand dropping as well. But those are exceptions that happen literally every single day. I mean, we could probably take up all of code every day, sending them out, go look here, go look there. So that's kind of tough. In the particular incident that we had with the 20-some odd residents living on that property, I think Roxana actually looked at the account, and over the time, there was no major spike. So obviously, he had been doing this for a while. So if it's a gradual increase, it's very difficult to capture this.
So are we going to, okay, I'm sorry, Councilwoman?
I was thinking that, I was trying to figure out a way where we could identify these cases without having to cause a mass, registration process. It seems very burdensome, invasive, and not what I would want to do to the grand majority that are doing things the right way, to try to figure out how to isolate and eliminate the problem people. Have we really considered all of our other options? Have we brainstormed on the session? Have we, in terms of code and our PD? Is this the suggestion that, are you in favor? Is PD thinking this is also going to be a solution for us? Like, is there another alternative, or is this the option?
I would have to send that back to the attorney because, as far as the permitting, I would have to agree that it could be pretty catchy, especially since, code enforcement is part of government and government intrusion on, it's an idea to be thought of. I don't know if there's any other cities that do that in particular, but, you do have those concerns.
Councilman Roth?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, with respect to the discussion about the permits, I mean, if you would allow me to do a little bit of research to see if this is a viable option, I think, then you could have a more fully formed discussion, because we'll know what it would have to look like by that point, and that might inform your decisions. But I do feel like we're shooting in the dark a little bit, because we don't know what those parameters are going to be yet. In the interim, Councilwoman Avila, to address your question, as I mentioned, at the start of this discussion, we had done some research, and I am going to get with the police department about this concept of these inspection warrants and the conditions under which they can be issued, and the scope of the inspections and searches that can be conducted pursuant to those. I just did this research this morning, and I have not had a chance yet to sit down with the police department to see what that would look like practically. But we are exploring other, multiple avenues to see how we can address this problem.
Councilman Roth?
Two thoughts. One, to follow up with the Vice Mayor's comments about technology. I remember several years ago when we got some complaints about the northwest section, and I asked if there was a possibility of us looking at the house next door and the house on the other side of the house that was being complained about for consumption. So if you've got a complaint that multiple families are living under the one roof next to a single family occupant and a single family occupant on the other side, you would notice that the consumption of water and electricity would be much higher than the two that were just acting as single-family homes. And it would take too many resources to go through that process to try to eliminate that. Just like with the overusage, or if you have a water leak and you get the bill, that's one thing. That triggers an automatic bill. And the other thing, the other thought I had was during either the permit process or the other considerations is to store your vehicle in the back, it must be stored in travel-ready condition. So somebody who keeps an RV and stores it in the back that has slide-outs and they're always open is an indication that potentially somebody's living in it, because you won't live in a unit that has slide outs. And even pop-up campers, if they've got a camper in their backyard and the pop-up is always up, that may be an indication that somebody is living in it. So that might be something to consider as you permit, or it should be in the garage or in your yard in a travel-ready position. You know, you can open it up to clean, whatever, you know, prior to an event. But if it's observed or somebody complains, then that's an obvious clue as well. So with that, I'll rest.
Thank you all. I just want to say, look, this has been an ongoing problem. And I don't mean this in a bad way. The code enforcement has been very good at telling us how and what they cannot do. I'm trying to find solutions. You know, you talk about burdensome and intrusive, Councilwoman, maybe after the breakfast on Friday. I'll take you for a ride around the Northwest. And when you slow down and start really looking at what's going on everywhere, it's disgusting. And there's no end in sight. And apparently, due to constitutional and statutory provisions, we've got to get real creative about putting an end to this. I posed the question this morning. They don't seem to have this problem in Pinecrest and Coral Gables. What do they do? Why do their people behave? You know, we can write people tickets all day long. And if it's their homesteaded property, they can ignore it and we can accrue liens until the cows come home and they thumb their nose at us. So, you know, I'm casting about here for some real solutions for our people who have made a real investment in our community to live here in a quiet neighborhood, free from that kind of you know, declining conditions. It's incumbent on us, and I welcome any suggestions. It's all going to be burdensome. It's all going to be costly, but we owe it to our residents to start now, or we're going to be past the point of no return.
Just want to clarify that I'm not in favor of any blight or any negative atmosphere for any of our property owners and our residents. And I'm very familiar with what those kinds of conditions can cause as neighbors. So I'm just wanting to make sure that if we're going to make a city-wide requirement, that we've really weeded out all of the other possibilities that could effectively come up with the same solution. So,
Well, you know, and I welcome that, and I guess we've got some consistency to send Mr. Pearl off to help find that, because every day, just between my house and my office, I see more and more and more on the same path weekly. You know, when you really start, it's disheartening. Thank you all. Okay, next item. I think we are at tab 6, which is somewhat related to the last tab, and I just wanted us to be loud and clear in that message to the manager and code enforcement that illegal occupancies are a priority for us in terms of quality of life, litter, garbage capacity, the potential for trafficking, all of the ills that these occupancies have brought to this community. I just wanted us to be cohesive and send the message to the manager and his staff that this is absolutely our priority, a priority. Councilman Roth?
Yeah, just a question. The county recently passed something about homeowners converting their garages into living.
Accessory dwelling units
So how does that affect the city of Homestead?
does not. That's for unincorporated areas.
Only, so the standard where we don't have to go, we can exceed what they say, but we don't have to apply that particular law to.
We are not obligated to allow that.
Okay, so, and I noticed, because here, it does say garages in here, and there are, not only in the northwest section, but in the villages as well, people have converted their garages into living dwellings. How do we combat that? I mean, you can't walk into somebody's house and ask to inspect it, right? I mean, And that's, as you were saying earlier, your frustrations is, constitutionally, they're protected from
Right.
that. But that creates additional traffic, parking issues. I mean, we're not a gated community, but we have people that do go around and look at stuff. But just like every other house that's built in the city, we have 2 parking spaces, right? Maybe 3 if you have a garage. And when you have multiple families living in a single-family unit, which is not traditionally the culture of in America, but when people come from other countries, they transfer that culture here. And now we have people living in not only in conditions that are subhuman in backyards, in storage containers and all these other things, but now they're living in a garage, which, may be nice, but you don't have a bathroom technically in there, you're not supposed to. But how do you combat that? And that's, I know it's a code issue, I know it's a code problem, but we've got to have some rights as a city to enforce our zoning, because that's a zoning issue. Because now you have a duplex for the most part in a single-family zoned area. So what are our rights as far as going in and saying, listen, something's not right here, can we look in your house? Can we do that?
Well, and I think, I'll jump in here, I don't think either one of us are for a whole lot of government regulation and intrusion. We understand that balance. But didn't at one time, doesn't, I think, Hialeah have now, they had such a problem with garage enclosures that at least when you're buying and selling a house and you get a lien letter request, that triggers the city being able to go in and ensure that there haven't been illegal improvements done within that original footprint.
Mayor, I'm vaguely hearing something like that. This was years ago, so yes, if you're selling your property, the city of Hialeah would actually come in and take a look and see if there was any illegal structures created within the home, and then they would have to address it at that point with the current homeowner, if I'm not mistaken. That was a while back, though.
I agree, and beyond that, again, with the privacy and the unreasonable search, I don't know how we get beyond that.
Sorry. At a sale, just like a estoppel letter, we would have the right to go in and do whatever inspection. So even sometimes in the listings, it shows it in the city that they have a finished garage, which is kind of out there. I mean, you're giving yourself up right then. So, but just another thought, that's all.
Again, we're all open to suggestions. And this didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to be fixed overnight, but I think we need to begin to go down that road. So I just, wanted some consensus there to impress upon staff that is a priority.
I think maybe we should allow smaller units. That way people wouldn't have to live behind people's yards and in sheds, which is a whole nother conversation we can have at another time.
Smaller single-family units? Smaller lots?
The condos, like for example in the downtown, if we allowed smaller units, which you had opposed to in the past, because you think, well, I don't know what you think, but you had said something that you just weren't in favor of smaller units because it creates additional problems.
And I'll stand by that. Yes, Councilwoman.
While we're on the topic of vehicles and things, the lot behind Roby George Park, it keeps growing. So many vehicles, different vehicles. I don't know if it's runoff from the junkyard, but they should have an ongoing citation. It got a little cleared up, and then it got bad again.
Yeah, they've been cited.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next item was just our confirmation that illegal dumping is another priority. Do whatever you need to do, and if you could update us on stakeouts and surveillance cameras, hopefully that will be proliferating if it has not already done so.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, last month I informed code enforcement that it was okay to hire 2 additional code enforcement officers, so bringing us up to 10. We already ordered a high-tech camera. Chrome Terrace is the first location we're looking at to go ahead and implement it. This camera actually has 4 cameras on it, so it catches you coming and going, night vision, digital zoom. Right now, it's actually being tested at the factory, if I'm not mistaken. And in addition to that, not only in illegal dumping, but working with code enforcement, developing strategies, how to kind of handle the situation, especially in the southwest and the northwest. You know, we know on the east side part of town is mostly HOAs, so they're pretty much in line. But this week we actually did a blitz. No, last week we actually did a blitz in the southwest part of town that we literally had all code enforcement officers there just going through the neighborhood looking. And so the idea is to create another grid space and actually do the same thing. In Lavaca, how many citations did we issue that day?
It was 108.
108 citations. So any illegal structure, mechanics working in their backyard on the cars, any illegal piles of garbage, things like that. They literally hit full blitz, just hitting everything. And so everybody's gotten notice or fined if it's a repeat offense. And then the thing is, let's go to the next grid pattern and let's do the same, because I think working like that, at least the message starts getting drilled in that, hey, we need to improve our situation here. If not, if it's one citation here, one citation there, I mean, I think it's minimal impact at that point.
I appreciate that. I was told I can't use the word target, but we can focus on areas and move from area to area. Appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a thought, and thank you for communicating that we have hired additional code enforcement officers. Like, in my mind, since this is a huge issue, I think we need to be really aggressive about this and perhaps have that task force where they have a laser-like focus on illegal dumping, not a specific zone that they have to go and monitor, but they are assigned to illegal dumping. And we communicate this to the community, not just let the word spread. No, we have messaging to put them on full notice that we are not tolerating this illegal dumping. We have a task force, and if you get caught, there will be consequences. At our last meeting, we talked about what other municipalities are doing to combat illegal dumping. Have we looked into some of their policies, their messaging, their communication, how they're getting it out there? Because we need to do more than let the word get out. We need to put the word out. So
Understood.
those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Any further? All right, so I wanted to follow up. Some of the complaints I've gotten have been that the claw, when we pick up bulk piles, leaves smaller items. Are we getting any closer to having the ability to get any more inmate crews? My thought is, I know other municipalities do that. They have a crew follow the bulk waste crew to rake up and pick up the small items that are left, because here, that just seems like that's the seed for the next pile.
Well, Mayor, that's something definitely we could do. I don't know if the trustees are the actual solution. The issue with the trustees, for example, we have one crew in the CRA, which is handled by the CRA, and one in Parks and Rec. For example, the Parks and Rec crew, I think they have 4 inmates, if not 5. The issue is for each inmate, I mean, for those 4 or 5 inmates, you have to have a guard, right? So right now, if I'm not mistaken, we have 3 bulky pickups trucks out on the field. So you can't put one trustee with one truck and one trustee with the other.
3 guards every day.
Right. So then that will be the challenge. And a guard in itself is like $58,000. So I think we'd be better off hiring help for solid waste to ride along with the bulky pickup people. So actually, when they finish, to go ahead and rake up. But that's something I can work with Crystal on to kind of see what we can and cannot do.
Enhance our QRT teams and equipment, something so that it's really cleaned up.
No, I understand, and I understand the concern and the challenge, but remember, limited resources. So if we pull QRT off of what their regular job is to actually go ahead and go after the bulky pickup, then we're kind of, you know, the palm fronds on the street, you know, the coconuts on the street, things of that nature, then those are going to be left out. And that's part of the challenge.
And the bottles and the cans. Okay, I
Yes,
just,
sir.
you know, a lot of little things. Yes.
One quick thing on that item, because we talked about it for a while, because that is also my biggest pet peeve, is you come and you pick up a pile and somebody walks by because there's already still trash there. So if we do have a trustee crew, we could definitely use them in some trouble areas, a nice little group. And then with the other 2 trucks, we could hire 1 or 2 people. So just keep that in mind, that there are areas that we could use a little group.
And they
I mean,
don't
if-
necessarily need to be in certain communities because you don't have that loose trash issue everywhere.
Right. I mean, if there are certain locations, Councilwoman, Mayor, and Council, just let us know. For, like I said, the CRA has its own trustee group, which is paid out of the CRA funds, so they're localized within the CRA. Once again, Parks and Recs, those are mostly handling the parks, but if there's an opportunity to take care of some other issues, definitely we.
One
can do
additional
that.
crew sounds like a bargain.
Definitely. And the biggest trouble areas are the areas that don't have sidewalks, right? They don't have the curb. And the claw just continues digging a hole that looks like a trash
It's a
bin.
trash pit.
And of course, the areas with apartments where you've got those bigger, you know, through a neighborhood, through Turner Circle or Pioneer Village, you don't need a crew. But the other areas where there's a lot of apartments and no sidewalks, it would definitely be a big help there.
We'll definitely look into it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Then, is it advisable to lease any additional? I know some of our issues for going off the route is all of this extra trash all of a sudden. And it takes longer to go to the dump, do our thing, and come back, and we're having to do it more often. Is it advisable? Is it cost effective? Is it feasible to lease any more trucks in the short term so that we don't have those capacity issues until we get the illegal dumping, for example, in hand?
The challenge is not the vehicles, because remember, we got the 3 new vehicles. We've gotten most of the line back up and running. The challenge is drivers. And I want to say within the last 4 to 6 weeks, I've literally been taking drivers from QRT and Public Works to go ahead and help out solid waste. You know, people call in, you know, it's Monday, it's a long weekend, people call out sick, or once again, just regular weekend, they call in sick, and that impacts the operation. So Public Works and once again, QRT or Parks and Julio have been kind enough to say, hey, listen, yeah, we can loan you a driver. So that's the way we've been handling it. So one of the meetings where I'm going to be having with Crystal is additional staffing as well, because we're only 1 line deep, right? 4 or 5 guys call out sick and we have a problem. So we need sufficient staffing to at least be there on site, whether they're working on the yard. I know Crystal's cross-training the folks there at Solid Waste. So if, hey, we're short a driver, or, you know, there's an accident or anything like that, at least we have another driver to actually put online. So right now, it's the human bodies more important than actual renting of vehicles.
Would it be advisable then to have a program where more of our folks can be trained and qualified to run this equipment? So that, you know, if we have a big call, the day after Super Bowl, whatever it may be, so that we've got some depth there of folks that we can legally call upon to operate the equipment?
Well, like I said, I've already spoken to Julio and Pedro. We're looking for people that are already have their CDL licenses to help us out. So we're already creating that list.
This morning already, you know, I got the email from the guy. The trucks came and only did 4 houses in my community, and then they left.
Well,
you know,
he might have had to go back to the dump
yeah,
and then
at
just come back
9:30
later. and
this
finish.
morning, already going to the dump.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know that's part of my concern is that you know, folks see that and you know based on prior experience are already jumping to the conclusion that we're not providing the service we promised. And, now you've got folks all over the place that are on this tangent about they put it on our tax bill, so we've already paid it in advance and we still don't get the services. Now, that's not true. I know they come back and we've all tried to notify folks that if your can doesn't get picked up on the appointed day, leave it out. We'll be back. And, slowly but surely. Okay, finally, I just wanted to confirm that we are going to go ahead and do the Defense Community Infrastructure Grant application
Yes, Mayor,
this year.
my understanding from Pam, the application period opened up last Friday, and absolutely 100% we're going to apply again. But it's our understanding they're kind of focusing more on infrastructure now than parks, but that doesn't matter. We're putting in our application.
Right, we know they shifted gears on us last year, that the prior year we would have been a shoe-in for big money, and the
Yes.
focus changed, and who knows what it will be this year. With that, that concludes my business. Anything further from council? I want to thank you all. I mean, I think there are a lot of small little items. It really pays for all of us to sit here and brainstorm, and not at 11:30 at night. And I think we had a lot of progress from all 7 corners today. Councilman Roth?
He already left, but yesterday was Mr. Fletcher's birthday.
Yes.
So happy birthday, Mr. Fletcher.
Absolutely. All right, motion to adjourn, seconded. All in favor? Aye, thank you.